Chapter 1784. It was her and her favorite book of fairy tales. The memory from a long time ago began to awaken in her spiritual world. Tina instantly fell and sat on the wooden floor of the treehouse. She stared blankly at the twin, conjoined baby girls who were lying on the ground. She could even see the light blue one-piece dresses that were specially sewn on them. She knew where their bodies were connected. The girls' beautiful long hair was tied into small braids. They had round faces, big eyes, and a few cute little freckles on their cheeks. They looked like porcelain dolls, but they suddenly started to crawl up like two monsters with many hands and two heads. They didn't really crawl up. Instead, their four hands and 4 feet supported against the wooden floor. They raised their heads with difficulty and crawled slowly toward her. Screams. The screams suddenly penetrated through the treehouse, as if they had disturbed the crown of the ancient tree, making the birds fly out abruptly. The sky darkened at once. Screams. In the banquet hall, Tiff, who was the older sister of the twin maids, suddenly screamed. After screaming, Tiff instantly fell to the ground. She hugged her body with a pale face and trembling lips. Obviously, she was extremely scared. Tiff didn't respond when he asked her what had happened. This was head chef Nelson's question. Miss Servant Girl just glanced at her thoughtfully. Mr. Varley glanced at her for a while. Miss Gonglina didn't pay much attention to them. She was looking at the chessboard, her eyes wandering on the map, as if she was thinking about something. Mr. Stewart didn't care. Blackhound only cared about when he would get the reward. Apart from Chef Narson, no one else seemed to care too much about this panicking girl. Even Mr. Narson seemed to have given up after asking a few questions to no avail. It seems that she has a relapse. Chef Nelson shook his head. He glanced at the others and finally looked at Miss Servant Girl, the leader of the masters. He shrugged and said, "They will have a relapse if they are separated for a long time. Don't worry, it will be fine when Tina comes out. Anyway, it won't affect your move. After you separated," the servant girl said indifferently. That is to say, the servant is also in the same situation, right? Probably. Chef Nelson shook his head. "I don't know what's going on inside. They've split up, so I don't know. Don't come over." Another scream sounded. Tiff suddenly covered her ears, stood up, and rushed out of the banquet hall. At this moment, the silent butler's eyes suddenly lit up. He waved his hand and said, "The game is not over yet. You can't leave." After saying that, 4 of the ghoul bodyguards suddenly jumped out. They blocked in front of Tiff, who had lost control. Their eyes suddenly turned black, and their skin, Lil P, it had also turned as pale as a corpse. "Miss Tiff, please go back. Get out of my way. My apologies." At this time, the 4 bodyguards rushed out at the same time. Tiff's eyes suddenly changed from fear to anger. Facing the 4 bodyguards, she was also touched and went crazy. Bang, bang. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the ghoul bodyguards were sent flying. Their bodies hit the wall, and their necks were twisted more than 90 degrees, and they fell to the ground. But the remaining 2 bodyguards successfully pressed the twin maid sister to the ground. They held Tiff's neck at the same time, and then each of them grabbed her left and right hands respectively, holding her down tightly like this. The girl was still struggling crazily. Mr. Butler turned over his palm, and there were 3 thick and long steel needles between his slender fingers. He waved his hand, and the 3 steel needles were directly thrown out. The next second, the steel needles were directly nailed on Tiff's forehead. Tiff's body suddenly tightened, and then softened, completely quieting down. Seeing this, the 2 ghoul bodyguards directly dragged Tiff back. "It's all right," Mr. Butler just said and stood quietly again. "Don't worry, let's continue." Mr. Varley smiled at this time. "Whose turn is it?" "Oh, it seems to be my turn." With this, Mr. Varley slowly picked up the golden dice used for the roll and then threw it into the chessboard. There was a trace of gray light cast from the mottled leaves, which brought a little visibility to the dark depths of the forest. Where there was a stream, on the roots of a dead tree by the water, Mr. Snave was reclining, drinking slowly, with difficulty, from the stream with his hands. But soon he coughed, and the blood he spat out suddenly dyed the slowly flowing water red. Mr. Snaff fell headfirst into the flowing water. The water was not deep, just covering half of his face, but the cold water was enough to wake him up a little. Mr. Sneeve turned over with difficulty to make himself feel better. The continuous reduction of the poison damage had not stopped, and the damage was slightly slowed down after the recovery of his self-made injury medicine was offset, but his HP was seriously below the safe warning line. The next HP reduction, as long as Blackhound's value was more than 3 points. Is this the only way? Mr. Sneeve whispered. It seemed to be a few names. Gerald, Tashara, Laney. Suddenly, Mr. Sneeve gritted his teeth, and in the midst of the angry cry, he propped up his body. However, this body, whether it was physically or spiritually, seemed to have reached its limit. Unwillingness and anger could not support it. Once again, he fell into the shallow stream. Mr. Sneeve began to laugh in despair, and his eyes gradually became cloudy. The sound of stepping on water. Mr. Sneeve's desperate laughter suddenly stopped. He seemed to hear the sound of stepping on water, and then under the dim light, a figure appeared in front of him. You are. We meet again. How are you, Mr. Sneeve? Beside the stream, the soaked Mr. Sneeve struggled to move his body so that his spine could be better attached to the roots of the tree. He looked at the young man who helped him up and frowned. Didn't I tell you to leave before 6 o'clock in the evening? See, this is the result of not listening to my advice and coming to this place. Boss Luo was about to start a fire, but then he remembered the big fireball he just made. He thought about it and asked, Mr. Sneeve, do you have any tools to start a fire? Sneeve could not help but frown. His words of reprimand were like a punch that missed. He was silent for a while, then he took out a bag and threw it out. The things in the bag were scattered, and there were tools that could start a fire. Thank you for your help. Luaccio smiled and said. Then he began to make a small fire with some dry weeds and withered leaves. Fire can bring warmth and light. Boss Luo looked at the source of civilization and smiled with satisfaction. Mr. Sneeve sneered. It can even bring death. In this place, it will make you the target of the monsters hiding here. You will become the morning star of the monsters in this roaring forest. Luaccio used a branch to poke the fire. Mr. Sneeve, have you played this game before? He was silent. In fact, he didn't like this young man very much. He hated the feeling of being touched. Boss Luo was always good at asking questions. Why do you want to fight with Mr. Varley to enter here? It's none of your business. Mr. Snaff sighed and closed his eyes. Don't be a busybody. Since we're already here, we should cherish the time we have left. Anyway, in the end, we won't be able to leave. I heard, Boss Luo said slowly. I heard from Miss Tina that Mr. Varley usually teams up with his servants and successfully passes the guardian. Then you must have misheard. Mr. Sneeve sneered. You don't look like a stupid person. Can you believe that woman's words? There's nothing wrong with believing more. Luaccio shook his head. Besides, if you want others to believe, there will be some truth in the lie. So in my opinion, the person who lied to you has told you part of the truth from the beginning. Perhaps it is anger that has blinded our eyes. You're suitable to be a pastor, Mr. Sneeve said, the kind of guy who stands in front of the church and asks people to do good deeds. Boss Luo didn't deny it. He just broke the branches in his hand and threw them into the fire. Mr. Sneeve was feeling the loss of his life, the loss of various meanings. At this moment, it was chaotic for him. Fast and slow were tangled together in confusion. Do you have a story you want to tell? Luaccio suddenly asked softly. Mr. Sneeve suddenly got out of the trance. He looked at him strangely and frowned subconsciously. Boss Luo smiled shyly. I like to listen to stories. I always like it. What can I get in return for telling you stories? Mr. Sneeve shook his head. Some people don't like to talk at all. They don't like to tell stories to others, and they don't like to listen to stories. Luaccio smiled casually. I met Miss Tina first, then Mr. Gores. Then you're really lucky. Sneeve glanced at him in surprise. He had already noticed that the weapon in his hand didn't look like an ordinary one. You can survive in the hands of those two guys. Boss Luo said, we didn't have many conflicts and soon formed a team. What did you say? Mr. Sneeve was startled and looked at him in disbelief. You said those two guys formed a team with you. Are you sure you're not dreaming? I don't think so. Boss Luo smiled. If I'm dreaming, things probably won't be like this. Mr. Sneeve looked at him suspiciously. He began to feel that it wasn't him that had a problem, but this young man's brain might have some problems. He shook his head. Why did they form a team with you? Boss Luo said matter-of-factly, since it's a multiplayer game, isn't it the purpose of the game itself? Since that's the case, what's wrong with forming a team? Mr. Sneeve rolled his eyes and sneered disdainfully. You still want to win? At least most of the time, I don't want to lose. Boss Luo said honestly, I think I haven't reached that level yet. It's still a bit vulgar. You can't win. Mr. Sneeve sneered, you can't win. Only that guy can win this game. This is destined from the beginning. That guy? You mean Mr. Varley? Mr. Snaff snorted softly and continued, is the master of the chessboard. The entire game is for him. Perhaps there will be situations that are disadvantageous to him, but that is only to increase the playability and excitement of the game itself. In the end, it is still for him to win with difficulty, so that he can enjoy the process, that's all. Boss Luo suddenly said, I heard from Mr. Gores that anyone who can leave here can bring out the items in the chessboard space. Mr. Sneeve should have played a chessboard game before. Did you bring out anything? Sneeve looked at Luocchio in surprise. He pondered for a while before saying, You said that Gores formed a team with you. Are you serious? Is there a problem? Boss Luo said, We're only temporarily separated because of storyline character. If Mr. Sneeve wants to meet Mr. Gores, you can follow me back later. Why would he tell you this? Mr. Sneeve was obviously confused. He subconsciously said, At that time, I also... How could he tell you this when you enter the game for the first time? What is Gores thinking? Maybe Mr. Gores just wants to win the game. Luocchio smiled and said, I just said that most people don't like to lose. He wants to win? Mr. Sneeve suddenly sat up. He wants to win? He wants to win. He also wants to win. I know that he wants to win. He always wants to win. Everyone wants to win. Suddenly, Mr. Sneeve seemed to think of something. He stared at Luocchio. It's not that he wants to win, but he thinks that he can see the opportunity to win from you. What secret do you have that can make him think like this? Although his eyes were cloudy, Mr. Sneeve's eyes were extremely sharp. He immediately thought of the key point that was unreasonable. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. As usual. Chapter 1785. Do you want to hear a story? Mr. Sneeve suddenly raised his head. Boss Luo nodded. He had not activated the passive ability that made people unable to say anything since the beginning. He had adjusted it after the twin maids talked about some strange topics because of this ability. Now, it was the power of language that could shake the psychological defense of the other party. This was something that anyone could do. Long-term companionship, continuous exploration, and perseverance. Doctors could always get in touch with the inner world of the patients in this way. Later, Luocchio found that no matter how incredible the altar was to realize a wish, it always had a normal way to realize it. It was just that the difficulty was different. The difficulty was different, which also meant that the price was different. But the conclusion could be determined. A wish that could be realized through other means. Many years ago, I was a fledgling hunter, the kind that was different from the ordinary hunters. Mr. Snakel adjusted his sitting posture, his expression becoming more natural. Perhaps it was because he wanted to say something that he had kept hidden for many years in his limited life. He needed to carefully recall and carefully organize his thoughts. He used the simplest words to express the longest story. When I first made my debut, I soon met an excellent demon hunting team. Geralt was the leader of the team. He was a handsome swordsman with excellent swordsmanship. He acted decisively and righteously. He was almost perfect. I didn't really like Tashira at first. He was always rude and liked to drink too much. However, he was always the first to step up when there was danger. You'll find that after spending some time with him, you'll gradually fall in love with his straightforwardness. Finally, there was Lainey, a powerful magician. She was elegant and noble. She was an intellectual woman who was unforgettable once you saw her. The team of four had a short and thrilling adventure until one day, Gerald brought back a piece of news about the castle. He said that the owner of the castle had a magical chessboard that could bring people endless power. We soon decided to go to the castle and steal the chessboard from the owner of the castle. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sneeve. I know I shouldn't have interrupted," Luaccio suddenly asked. "But I'm really curious. How did Mr. Gerald get the information about the chessboard?" He said that he bought it from a reliable information broker. We all know this information broker. Mr. Sneeve frowned unhappily. What's there to be puzzled about? Most of the demon-hunting squads like us will obtain unknown information through the hands of information traffickers. Please continue. Boss Luo nodded. Mr. Sneeve continued to recall and ponder. He slowly said, "That day, we came to the forest outside the castle, but we encountered a fierce battle with a group of rotting beasts. These were zombie beasts. They weren't high-level beasts, so their bodies were constantly rotting. However, there were simply too many of them. We fought until late at night and barely wiped out these zombie beasts. We rested on the spot for a night and planned to sneak into the castle during the day, because vampires are always at their weakest during the day. They also feel sleepy and can't concentrate. We heard that the owner of the castle would definitely sleep during the day and wake up at 6 o'clock in the evening. Therefore, the initial time to leave was before 6 o'clock in the evening. Laney used magic to secretly open a passage in the courtyard of the east wing of the castle, allowing us to successfully enter the courtyard. This passage is the one you told us about. Luaccio couldn't help but be curious. It's still there after so many years. Mr. Sneeve nodded. That's a very special magic. It's hidden and deceptive. Therefore, it has been there for so many years, but it has always been ignored. It's a path that only my squad knows about. He shook his head. We chose to enter the castle at noon, when the sun was the strongest. We acted according to the plan we discussed. Tashila and I were in one team, while Gerald and Laney were in the other. We began to search for the location of the chessboard. We also agreed that regardless of whether there was any news or not, we had to gather at the exit before 6 o'clock in the evening. As a hunter, I'm very good at hiding. I can make up for Tashila's impulsiveness. Therefore, we were not discovered during the whole day of searching. Tashila and I didn't find anything until 6 o'clock in the evening, so we returned to the exit at the agreed time. However, we didn't see Gerald and Laney. They might have failed. Just as I was discussing how to rescue them, a black shadow appeared in front of us. We didn't even see the other party's face clearly before we were knocked to the ground and passed out. Mr. Sneeve sighed. When I woke up, I saw Gerald, Laney, and Tashila. We woke up in the banquet hall of the castle. At that time, other than the owner of the castle, there was a huge chessboard in front of us, the thing we wanted to steal. The owner of the castle knew that we came for the chessboard. He made a request for us to participate in the game of the chessboard. If we could defeat him, he would let us take the chessboard away. Even if it wasn't for the chessboard, this was our only way out. We seriously underestimated the power of the owner of the castle. We thought that he was a little vampire in hiding, but we didn't expect that the owner of the castle was a noble of the powerful Tsimus clan, one of the 13 clans. He was also one of the heirs of the clan. We really had no other choice. So, when Mr. Sneeve participated in the game, you were a master? How do you know? Mr. Sneeve asked in surprise. Because you've survived, and you've lived until now. Boss Luo said indifferently, according to the rules of the chessboard, if a servant fails or dies, they can't leave. Mr. Sneeve sighed. I was the master at that time, and it was decided by drawing lots. My servant was Gerald. Laney was also a master, and her servant was Tashila. This was the first time we played the chessboard game, so we weren't familiar with all the rules of the chessboard. However, the owner of the castle, Walid Tsimus, was the owner of the chessboard. You can imagine how big the gap between us is. You are now here, so you should be able to understand the danger here. Well, there was no danger for the time being. Boss Luo continued to light the fire. But no matter what, after a period of exploration and luck, we finally met and gained a good profit. We could have met in this roaring forest immediately. At that time, There were only 3 masters fighting. We believed that as long as we could meet, the chances of defeating the owner of the castle would be greatly increased. But I made a mistake. Mr. Sneeve took a deep breath at this time. Before the final meeting, I encountered a difficult problem. I needed to solve this problem before I could move forward. I made a mistake in my answer, causing Gerald to fall into a difficult battle. It took him 3 full rounds before he was able to successfully end the battle. Then, when we finished the battle, the owner of the castle had already let his servant attack Sheila first. Mr. Sneeve clenched his fists, and his wrinkled arms could not help but tremble slightly. He gritted his teeth and said, Sheila lost and died in the chessboard space. The punishment roulette appeared, and Lenny had to turn it. She was punished, and her soul was sent to the chessboard. It was me. It was such a simple question, but I answered it wrong. I'm the one who killed them. In grief and anger, Mr. Sneeve coughed a few times, and his voice gradually became hoarse. Gerald was injured. He could not cope with the following battle. It was just that I was controlled by anger at that time. I clearly had enough action points to escape the roaring forest, to let Gerald recover in other places, and even to get more resources to regroup. Perhaps there was still hope for victory. It was me. I recklessly let Gerald launch the attack immediately. He clearly reminded me, but I still ignored Gerald's reminder. I killed him. I killed him. I killed him. He was crying bitterly. Perhaps he needed to cry bitterly in front of others. Then Gerald as a servant died, so you also had to face the punishment roulette. Luaccio waited for a while until Mr. Sneeve calmed down a little. Then he slowly asked, Then how did you survive and become the castle's gardener for so many years? I did turn the roulette, Mr. Sneeve said in a low voice, but the punishment I received was to be thrown into the chessboard to fight a random monster. I don't know whether it was fate playing with me or punishing me. I only know that I must survive. I must take revenge. I must take revenge on the owner of the castle. The battle made me lose my eyes, made me a cripple, and even destroyed my face, but I still defeated that monster. I succeeded in coming out of the chessboard alive. The owner of the castle did not drive me away. Instead, he threw me into the courtyard. He told me that it was because of my mistake that he could win the game. He wanted to thank me, so he let me stay. I know, he just wants to see me, this old dog, suffer and suffer every day. He wants to hear me roar powerlessly and crazily. These are all things that make him happy. I don't remember how many years I lived in the courtyard. The days were just repeated pain for me, until I entered the chessboard again as a servant. This is the story you want to hear. The fire gradually extinguished. The smaller and smaller flames were like Mr. Sneeve's life value at this time. Do you think that today, after so many years, there is finally an opportunity for revenge? Boss Luo's voice suddenly sounded. Mr. Sneeve shook his head. After so many years, I understand a truth. The idea of revenge through the chessboard will never work. No one could defeat Wally in this chessboard. I've seen it too many times. The participants forced him into a dead end again and again, but he was able to reverse the situation and win in the end. Sneeve looked at Luaccio at this time. This is actually designed. He designed it again and again to let you feel hope. Even no matter what kind of function card you draw from the function card box, it may be arranged by him. Your hope, your dawn of victory, are all just as games. But you still entered, Boss Luo said indifferently. And you gave up the opportunity to stay outside and continue to look for revenge. Since you can't defeat Mr. Wally in the chessboard, I think there may be a way outside the chessboard. There is no way, Mr. Sneeve said sadly. Look at me. Do you think I have the ability to kill Wally? Impossible, no. For so many years, I didn't wait for the appearance of a powerful demon hunter who could kill him. Do you know the flower wall in the courtyard? And the willow forest in the center of the flower wall, do you know how they were cultivated? They were cultivated with the blood of the demon hunters, adventurers, and even ordinary people who died here. I can't even count how many of their corpses I've dealt with over the years. I can't hold on anymore. Mr. Sneeve sighed deeply. It didn't turn me into a vampire or even a ghoul. I'm still just an ordinary human. I'll grow old, and now I'm extremely old. I may not be able to hold on for many years. This time, I came in just to see them again. They died in the roaring forest. I know their souls must have been tortured here for so many years. I only hope that I can repent in front of their souls at the end of my life. I seem to be able to see them. Mr. Sneev's eyes gradually became hazy at this time. He seemed to see a few small light shadows surrounding him at this time. They were like elves. They looked at him with soft eyes and nestled on his shoulder. "Is it you?" Mr. Sneeve murmured at this time. "Lenny, Tashra, Gerald, is it you? Did you come to pick me up? I'm sorry, for so many years I didn't come to see you, leaving you in this dark forest. I'm sorry. Mr. Sneeve slowly closed his eyes as if he was waiting for his long-awaited death. "Well, I'm sorry, but Mr. Sneeve, maybe you didn't see them." Boss Luo's voice suddenly sounded. "Nonsense. They're obviously here, right beside me." Sneeve couldn't help but become agitated. He opened his eyes and was enraged. This place is full of miasma, especially next to this kind of water source. It should be thicker. Boss Luo shook his head and said, "You probably saw an illusion because of the miasma. In fact, I really didn't see them beside you." Nonsense. How could I be affected by the miasma? But you didn't." "Oh, I seem to have the blessing of advanced poison damage immunity, so the miasma shouldn't have any effect on me." Mr. Sneeve opened his mouth as if he didn't feel good and suddenly drained his strength. How to say it? So angry. Hashtag PS 6884. Chapter 1786. It was like riding a roller coaster with ups and downs. Mr. Sneeve gradually recovered from a trance state. He suddenly found that he had nothing to say. He felt calmer than he imagined. He had never felt like this for many years. After his emotions were partially vented, it turned out to be like this. The small forest elves that could be seen around him gradually disappeared in front of him. His vision became clearer, and even his breathing became smoother unconsciously. What is this smell? He moved his nose, only to feel that he smelled a tangerine-like fragrance at this time. He saw a bottle in Luacio's hand that had been unscrewed at this time. The fragrance seemed to come from this bottle. Antidote. Luacio smiled slightly. It was dropped when we were fighting monsters. The description said that it can effectively dispel the negative effects of the miasma and some detoxification effects. It seems that even the poison damage I was originally inflicted with. Mr. Sneeve couldn't help but be startled again. He was surprised to find that his declining HP had stopped. The reason for the continuous injury was from Mr. Varley's servant, Cadillac. He didn't even get hit by the arrow. He was already poisoned just by passing by. This showed the power of the poison on the arrow. This was obviously not something that could be dispelled by an antidote dropped by a monster. How could there be such a coincidence? While doubting in his heart, Mr. Sneeve, who was cured of the poison state, quickly opened the small bag on his body. He grabbed various herbs, fruits, and other things from it. Then he mixed them together, stuffed them into his mouth, chewed a few times, and swallowed them directly into his stomach. This probably had an immediate effect. His expression also began to ease up. His HP was slowly increasing. "Thank you," he suddenly said solemnly. "Mr. Sneeve, do you want to team up with us?" "I'm afraid this is not my decision." Sneeve shook his head. "I've trained the black dragon for many years, but I still can't make it understand the meaning of words. For such a prompt, the chances of it choosing the right one is only 50%. Generally speaking, if one side made a request to form a team, the other side would naturally choose to accept or reject. Choosing one out of the two, there was indeed a 50% chance. As for Black Dragon, it was obviously the name of Mr. Sneeve's black dog. "We have to give it a try," Boss Luo laughed. "It's okay if you refuse, just try a few more times." "You." Mr. Sneeve looked at the young man in front of him suspiciously. "Do you really think you can win this game?" Boss Luo shook his head and said, "In most cases, winning is definitely better than losing. But if the process is more interesting than the result, I don't mind losing." Mr. Snakel opened his mouth. He subconsciously looked at his surroundings, as if he was trying to make certain things clear. To make certain that the little light shadows that appeared beside him just now did not appear at all. After a long time, Mr. Sneeve nodded and sighed. So be it. Anyway, the worst ending is to die here. This time, I didn't intend to leave the chessboard space. His luck was pretty good. The black dragon successfully chose to accept on his first try. Suddenly, it began to wag its tail, stood up from its prone position, and then came to Miss Servant Girl's side and wagged its tail. It seemed to be fawning, but obviously, Miss Servant Girl didn't have any reward in hand, or she didn't intend to give any reward at all. At the same time, those messy function cards that belonged to the black dragon were transferred to Miss Servant Girl's preparation area. There were not only Miss Servant Girl's function cards, but also the function cards that belonged to Tiff and Chef Nelson. Now, counting the function cards that were randomly placed by the black dragon, the number of function cards in Miss Servant Girl's preparation area was magnificent. Perhaps 1/3 of the function cards are here. Mr. Nelson couldn't help murmuring at this moment. He glanced at the card box with the function cards on the chessboard. According to the number of function cards that Miss Servant Girl had now, it was almost 1/3 the height of the card box. But in fact, no one knew how many function cards there were in the card box. At least now, the card box was still full. First it was Tiff, then it was Nelson, and now it's Snake. Mr. Varley squinted his eyes and smiled. I feel like I'm being condemned. In addition, too many function cards may not be a good thing. Too many choices will only make the originally suitable card combination more difficult to choose. Miss Servant Girl suddenly chuckled. Mr. Varley, if we meet, will you accept my team application and pass the level together? Why are you in such a hurry to decide the winner? Mr. Varley said at this time, this is not a game to find a way to beat the last keeper. It's my turn to roll the action point again. I hope there will be an ideal point. As he said, he threw the die on the chessboard. It spun slowly and finally stopped. Mr. Varley looked at the point that appeared, and a meaningful smile appeared on his face. This is what I want. Action point, 3 o'clock. On the chessboard, the distance between the servant Kelly and the current boss Luo and Mr. Sneeve happened to be 3 squares away. At the same time, the position of the servant Kelly and Dr. Gores was also 3 squares away. However, one of the servants, the twin, made Tina's card was moving. Yes, it was moving irregularly. The land was moving closer to the edge of the roaring forest, and it was easy to touch the edge of the circle of light. However, as long as the circle of light on the chessboard did not disappear, the servants in Miss Autopsy's party could still move freely. As for the servant card of Mr. Butler, it was also in the roaring forest at this time, but it was outside the aperture, waiting for the next action point. Miss Gonglina's servant was still motionless, but Mr. Varley had vaguely guessed what means she used to create this situation. The function cards in the card box were actually endless. In theory, they were endless, but the types of function cards should be limited. Since he had the chessboard, he basically knew the contents of most of the function cards. At least, until now, there was no new card that he had never seen before. At this time, Mr. Varley glanced at the servant girl Tiff, who was motionless like a corpse. After he chuckled, his servant card on the chessboard began to move. Love, 999. Are you feeling better? Mr. Sneeve's face became better. After a short rest, not only did his physical strength recover, but even his HP had returned to a relatively safe state. Mr. Sneeve stood up, moved his hands and feet, and nodded. Since we are a team, then tell me what you are doing in the roaring forest now. Black Dragon can't provide me with this information. Boss Luo briefly explained that they met a woman who was shot by an arrow on the way. Mr. Sneeve frowned and asked with a slightly nervous look, does the woman who was shot by an arrow have pointy ears? Is she very beautiful, wearing clothes made of vines like an elf? Probably so. Luocchio asked curiously, Sir, do you know her? I think I've seen her before. Mr. Sneeve took a deep breath at this time and said, not only have I seen her before, I even encountered the same thing as you. It was also a woman who was shot by an arrow. As I said, when I was in the game last time, I was about to meet up with my companions, but I encountered a problem and was delayed. How long have you been out? For some time. Boss Luo thought for a moment. but the time here is not easy to calculate, but probably around has passed. After all, HP has been reduced once. I'm afraid Gores is in danger. Mr. Sneeve frowned at this time and said, We'd better go back now. Maybe we can still make it. Is there a problem with the woman who was shot by an arrow? She's fine, but be careful. In a split second, Mr. Sneeve pushed Boss Luo to the side. At the same time, a black arrow brushed past Boss Luo's shoulder and nailed to the rock on the side. The entire arrowhead had sunk into the boulder, which showed the power of the arrow when it was shot. It's rapid reaction again. For an archer, this is really an annoying skill. A man with an arrow at this time slowly walked out while talking. Cardil, Mr. Varley's follower. Found you, and it seems that there is an additional prize. The black longbow with an arrow was raised at this time, and the sharp arrowhead was pointed at Luaccio and Mr. Sneeve not far away. The 3 action points that Mr. Varley threw out were obviously used here. Mr. Sneeve gritted his teeth at this time, and his body bowed slightly. Tense, he was ready to fight at any time. So anxious, this is not like that guy's style. I think he might have to wait a little longer before he makes a move to pick the so-called sweet fruits of victory. This is the master's thought. Cardil was expressionless. I just know that this is the battle command, and I didn't follow this command. I have no choice. I have given you a chance before. Mr. Sneeve said, Your action limit should be this place, but we are now free to move in the area. The battle doesn't have to be carried out to the end. If you want to avenge your companion, you should want to see that guy lose the game and then be punished. Cardil said indifferently, If the heir of the Tsimus family loses, it means that I, as a follower, have to accept the same punishment. Revenge can wait until I leave the chessboard. Although it's ironic, obviously what I need to do now is to obey. Be careful. This time I'm not going to remind you where my arrow will shoot. The moment the word place was uttered, Cadillac's fingers had already loosened, and the arrow on the bowstring instantly shot out. It actually made a rapid sound in the air. Mr. Sneeve's pupils suddenly contracted. With the effect of the rapid response function card, he could barely see the direction of the arrow at this time. It was aimed at him. His whole body reacted at this moment. Just as he was about to dodge, he saw that the rapidly shooting arrow suddenly split into 2. One was aimed at him, and the other was aimed at Luaccio. *T, he can't dodge. This thought flashed through Mr. Sneeve's mind. While he was moving, the arrow that was shot at him narrowly missed him because of his early precautions. Because of the poison damage on the arrow, Mr. Sneeve once again received the warning that he was poisoned. But he didn't care about this, because in his mind, the arrow that Cardil shot had hit Boss Luo, who was the temporary leader of the follower team. The arrow was directly nailed on Boss Luo's chest at this time. Mr. Sneeve only felt that the world was spinning. His lips trembled slightly. The moment he was about to pounce on Cardil, he saw that the arrow that was supposed to be nailed on Luaccio's chest suddenly fell to the ground. Boss Luo touched his chest at this time. It seems that the arrow didn't pierce through my armor. Armor. Mr. Sneeve opened his mouth. Armor. In the distance, Cardil's eyes narrowed, as if he couldn't believe it. What kind of armor could block his arrow? This arrow even had the attribute of penetrating armor. It was specially made, and could even be retrieved after it was shot. At this time, the arrow that fell to the ground disappeared in an instant, and then appeared directly in Cardil's palm. He looked down subconsciously. He clearly saw that the sharp arrowhead of the arrow that fell to the ground was blunt. Yes, armor, leather armor or something like that. Don't you have it on you? Boss Luo nodded. I saw that the armor was a bit gaudy, so I chose not to show it. You should also have it on you, armor. As he said, a bright light flashed out. Luaccio, who was wearing a banquet dress, had a set of shining, colorful light on his body. The light was enough to illuminate this area, almost blinding people's eyes. At this time, there was a small, shallow mark on the chest of the golden armor. This was clearly the place where Cardil's arrow hit. I don't have it. I don't have such armor. I don't have it either. I don't have such armor. Hashtag. Chapter 1787. So dazzling. As a vampire, he seemed to have an instinctive resistance to this kind of sun-like radiance. Cardil covered his eyes at this time. It was really dazzling, as if it could burn the soul. Then, the light of the armor suddenly disappeared. The transition from aurora to extreme darkness made Mr. Sneeve and Cardil unable to adapt. They only felt that Boss Luo seemed to be shrouded in darkness in their sight, right? Because it's too fancy, it's more convenient to hide. Mr. Sneeve swallowed subconsciously. He suddenly glanced at the worn leather wristbands on his wrist that he obtained from the wolf den. He only had this pair of leather wristbands on his body. In the next second, the leather wristbands suddenly disappeared. Mr. Sneeve rubbed his wristbands and nodded casually. Yes, indeed, it's not convenient to reveal these protective gears. In the distance, Cardil's legs were actually hidden in the grass. The leg armor on his feet also quietly disappeared. He lifted his left foot and scratched the heel of his right foot, then stood still and then snorted coldly. The tense atmosphere returned in an instant. After Cardil snorted coldly, he sneered and said, "No matter how good the protective gear is, there are places that it can't protect. You shouldn't expose your armor in front of the enemy. This is equivalent to exposing your weakness. For example, your throat, your eyes, and your forehead. There are too many places that I can shoot." Boss Luo didn't say anything. He just reached out his hand and lightly knocked on his forehead. Then, a crisp sound of metal clashing suddenly sounded. He said, "The helmet and armor are set. It's more fancy with the helmet." "Humph, even if you're fully armed, I don't believe that you don't need to breathe. My arrows are highly poisonous." Okay, he also has high-level poison immunity. Mr. Sneeve shook his head at this time. "Didn't Wally tell you?" Now it seems that this guy's current model completely restrains you in all aspects. This made Cadillac almost have the urge to drop his bow. He didn't believe it and shot out 3 sharp arrows in quick succession. Boss Luo didn't seem to make any movements, but the 3 arrows hit his forehead, eyes, and throat respectively. This showed how accurate Cartier's archery was. And then, there was nothing after that. He looked at the 3 arrowheads that had already been blunted and returned to his hand. He remained silent. How was he supposed to fight this? "Wally, what was going on? Didn't you say that this is one of the invincible professions, that every shot is accurate and unparalleled?" Carderia cursed in his heart. "Are you playing with me? Did you send me here to die?" But what he didn't know was that Mr. Varley, who was in front of chessboard, was also a loss. Chessboard, roaring forest. Incompetent rage was just a way to vent his anger. It had no positive effect on the actual situation. Cardil knew that no matter how much he cursed, he wouldn't be able to change the current situation. Thus, he quickly calmed down and reorganized himself. The arrows didn't break the opponent's defense, and the poison didn't work, but it didn't mean that the battle would lead to a losing situation. Although it was disadvantageous, he should still have the advantage in speed. At the very least, he could use guerrilla warfare to delay time. As for the function card, the mysterious function card should have the possibility to turn the situation around. How could Wally let him kneel in this place so quickly? If so, he, the owner of the castle and the owner of chessboard, would be too disgraceful. Wally still didn't give any response to Carderia, which made Carderia couldn't help but think in his heart. Was Wally doing this on purpose to toy with him? Indeed, I can't think of a way to deal with you now. Carderia, who regrouped, shook his head at this time and threw the 3 blunt arrows in his palm on the ground. Although I can't deal with you, I'm not sure about the old guy beside you. The black longbow was raised again, and the sharp arrow was clearly aimed at Mr. Sneeve. Shoot! But Boss Luo took a step forward at this time and directly blocked in front of Mr. Sneeve. The arrow hit his chest again. Carderia had already expected this. At this moment, he pulled the bowstring again, but this time he put 3 arrows at the same time. 2 of them, when they were shot, the trajectory even became an Arcloaccio had to let go of his palm, and a pale golden light shield covered himself and Mr. Sneeve at the same time, blocking Carderia's attack. It had to be said that the sharp arrows shot by Carderia were actually pierced through the light shield, but the speed of the arrows was completely slowed down. Boss Luo still had the reaction speed of this speed, so he moved his sword forward. The 3 arrows were broken and fell directly to the ground. Seeing that this also didn't work, Carderia didn't intend to give the opponent any chance to breathe. He angrily stretched out his hand again, intending to take out the special armor-piercing arrows from the quiver again, but in an instant he touched nothing. Carderia couldn't help but be startled. His palm turned over the quiver again a few times, but still couldn't find it. He was shocked and suddenly realized these armor-piercing arrows and quiver were exclusive equipment. Because the arrows had the function of recycling after being shot out, there weren't many arrows equipped to begin with. There were no more arrows. How could there be no more arrows? Carderia was shocked. He looked down and saw that the blunted arrows thrown to the ground by him didn't return to his quiver at all. The arrowheads of these arrows were not only blunted, they were actually damaged. How could he fight like this? He had already used up all the arrows he could shoot. He suddenly felt that he had fallen into a rather awkward situation. His palm was still on the quiver behind his back, but it was already frozen. He used up all his arrows. Mr. Sneev's eyes were sharp, and he instantly pointed out Carderia's awkward situation at this time. At this time, Boss Luo took a step forward with his big sword. He didn't have the style of a peerless swordsman and unparalleled aura. Be careful, I'm going to make a move. Mr. Sneeve couldn't help but secretly shake his head. Does this person know how to fight? At this time, Boss Luo raised his sword high and directly slashed out. At this moment, Mr. Sneeve was quite glad that he didn't really say what he thought in his heart just now. God, what did he see? That was a dozen groups of 4 to 5 meters high arcs of light. Light pieces standing upright, connected, and then directly cut the ground, plowing straight forward terrifying attacks. Moreover, the speed wasn't slow at all. It was only slightly slower than the arrows shot by Carderia. Be careful. Be careful your ass. This was no longer a matter of being careful, but a matter of not being able to avoid the attack range of these terrifying arcs. He could only face them head-on. In a moment of desperation, Carderia instantly removed the quiver behind his back, and at the same time, waved the black longbow in his hand. When the arcs of light arrived, he was already prepared to directly escape into the forest after facing them head-on. Thus, after a huge impact and a splitting sensation, Cadillac was sent flying backward. After breaking 5 or 6 large trees, he endured the excruciating pain all over his body. He didn't even care about the black longbow and quiver that had been deformed. He immediately got up, spitting out blood as he turned around and ran without caring about anything else. Why don't you chase after him? At this time, Mr. Sneeve saw that Luaccio was standing still and had no intention of chasing after him. So he couldn't help but say anxiously, "This is the best opportunity to defeat him. If he escapes, Varley will know your details." A servant. This was Varley's servant. As long as he was killed here, Varley was bound to receive the punishment of the punishment wheel. Mr. Sneeve couldn't help but reveal bloodshot eyes at this time, like a wild beast that wanted to eat a human alive. Luaccio glanced at Mr. Sneeve like this, and directly put down the big sword, asking such a question. Before, when you fought with him, was it also like this? At that time, Carderia would remind him every time he attacked, and even let him go in the end. Mr. Sneeve opened his mouth, and his tightly clenched fist suddenly dropped down powerlessly. Immediately, he gritted his teeth and said with a ferocious face, "This is the best opportunity to defeat Varley. I won't give up. If you don't go, I will go." As a member, he had successfully obtained a right to move freely in the aperture. As soon as he turned around, Mr. Sneeve rushed into the forest. Boss Luo watched his figure disappear in the forest and suddenly whispered, "Did you see that? This is him after many years." Beside him, a small shadow suddenly appeared in the air. It was palm-sized like a little elf. Banquet hall. Mr. Varley's finger was gently tapping the ring on his other hand, as if he was thinking about something. According to Carderia's description, this was obviously the sacred armor set. Only this set could ignore the armor-piercing function of the shadow arrow. But it shouldn't. Sacred armor shouldn't be on the path of this servant. This was the ultimate armor that could challenge the Guardian alone. The difficulty of collecting a set was not even easier than challenging the Guardian without any armor. No, it shouldn't at this time. Facing Carderia's incompetence and rage in the chessboard, Mr. Varley still maintained his elegant appearance. After he finished his roll, he entered the HP reduction and the function card drawing process, followed by a new round of roll. This at least gave him some time to sort out the current information. The mission of Sacred Armor required the profession of Holy Light series to activate. He had been secretly studying Miss Maid's actions. He could be sure that except for the encounter along the way, Boss Luo, as a servant, didn't carry out any mission. In that case, the divine armor was obtained from the demons we encountered on the way here. Could it be that the demon he encountered was a guardian? No, it's not sure if it was sacred armor. After all, it required the profession of Holy Light series to trigger the chain mission of sacred armor. Only through this extremely difficult chain mission could one obtain sacred armor. This was common sense. Even he couldn't successfully complete the mission and collect a full set of sacred armor before the end of the game every time. Before the game started, he had already chosen a few different invincibility plans for himself. The Holy Light series was one of them. However, he did not get the Holy Light series class function card at the start. That was why he settled for the next best thing. He chose the Shadow series class function card that allowed him to level up faster. There were some limitations, but it was still enough to solo the Guardian. I should think carefully about the strategy of dealing with sacred armor. I've done a similar deduction before. Recall it. Mr. Varley, Mr. Varley. Butler Lisa's voice suddenly sounded in the ears of the castle owner. What's the matter? Is it time for me to roll again? So fast. Mr. Varley subconsciously looked at his butler, Lisa, and seemed to have recovered from shock. But seeing the butler looking at him at this time, Mr. Varley couldn't help but frown. At this moment, the anxiety in his heart became extremely strong. It is indeed your turn, Mr. Varley. The butler shook his head and said calmly, but it's not the roll. It's the roulette. What did you say? Mr. Varley was stunned. Then he suddenly thought of something and looked up. In front of him, above his head, the punishment roulette of the chessboard was slowly opening and facing him. Mr. Varley's pupils contracted violently. The punishment roulette had completely appeared and slowly descended in front of him. Just like how Mr. COR, the leader of the vampire monitoring team, faced the roulette, a blood-red arm appeared on the roulette and reached out to grab his hands and feet. Chef Narson stared at the scene in disbelief, or at least he was in a daze. It was as if this was something that should never happen. His mind was completely blank, as if he could no longer think. The ghoul bodyguard around him seemed to have seen something terrible at this time, and they all looked terrified. Miss Gonglina's sexy lips slightly opened. Obviously, this was a sudden scene that made her unable to react. Varley lost in the middle of the game? Even the Grand Duke of the Clans was defeated by Varley. But what the hell happened? He spent a lot of effort to create the Shadow series servant, but it couldn't even last a single round. It was clear that Cardill's furious voice rang in his ears not too long ago. Yes, what the hell happened? He was thinking about countermeasures, reorganizing his strategy, and even before the new round of roll started, what happened in this short period of time? Cadillac died in battle, just like that? Then, Mr. Varley saw the golden die that was still in front of him. When he was thinking about countermeasures, the roll of life reduction seemed to be in front of him again. With Cardill's HP as high as 6 or 800 points, it didn't matter how he rolled. He seemed to have rolled 3 points, and according to the rule of multiplying by 10, 30 points of HP would be deducted accordingly. In other words, when he rolled the life reduction roll, Cardill had less than 30 points of HP left. He actually rolled his own servant to death. The blood-red arm stretched out from the punishment. Roulette began to wrap around Mr. Varley's arm and touch the roulette bit by bit. A touch of panic appeared in Mr. Varley's eyes for the first time. Hashtag, 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 PS 6984. Chapter 1788. In the banquet hall, the ghoul bodyguards are the most nervous because they didn't know what would happen to their master in the next few seconds, or perhaps a dozen or so seconds. Miss Gonglina's pair of beautiful eyes looked at Mr. Varley, but soon she no longer paid attention to him. Mr. Varley's palm had now touched the punishment roulette, and he was about to forcefully rotate the roulette. His panicked eyes suddenly showed a smile. Speaking of which, this is the first time I was forced into such a desperate situation. Mr. Varley had a smile on his face. This is really a thrilling battle, and it's full of surprises. Unexpectedly, the bloody arm of the punishment roulette was loosened little by little at this moment. Even the roulette itself faded a little bit. In Mr. Varley's preparation area, a function card was slowly opened, and then it was thrown into the chessboard. Cade's servant card that had disappeared appeared again at this time. But the position it appeared it was the place where he landed at the beginning of the game. Resurrection of the Dead. Mr. Varley said with a look of pity at this time, I originally thought that maybe it could only be used when facing the gatekeeper. There will only be one precious card in a game. After a resurrection of the dead, all the gains of the servant would be reset, and the servant would return to the most primitive state and be resurrected at the starting point. At this moment, the distance between Cade's servant card and Roaring Forest was not something that could be made up by simply throwing a few rounds of action points. At this time, it actually returned to its original state. Miss Gonglina smiled at this time. In my memory, you really have never encountered such a bad environment. Varley, it's not too late. This is equivalent to deleting your account in the middle and later stages of the game. I'm afraid you will have to work hard to catch up. That's right. Mr. Varley shrugged. Maybe I'm already preparing to accompany you. If Sister Gonglina doesn't mind, you can protect me. I think I need a team now. It's too far. Miss Gonglina said indifferently. I can't get there. Mr. Varley smiled indifferently, then looked at Miss Maid across the chessboard. Now it seems that I have lost the qualification to join forces with this lady, right? That's hard to say. The servant girl smiled. The existence of the function card is really surprising. Perhaps, in Mr. Varley's hands, there's a card that is not worse than the resurrection of the dead. I do. At this time, Mr. Varley made a gesture like a curtain call to the audience. I'll leave for the time being. I'll slowly develop for a few rounds at the edge. As he said, he handed the dice to Miss Gonglina. A new round of betting began. Mr. Varley didn't seem to be annoyed at being beaten back to the original position. Trash. Cadillac's consciousness had once been empty, and then his consciousness returned. In fact, he had woken up amidst the torrent of abuse. This was obviously an insult from his master. He didn't know what kind of expression Mr. Varley, the master, had on his face, but just by hearing his voice, he could feel the other party's almost crazy excitement. Cadillac bored in silence until the storm had calmed. Tell me everything that happened just now, without missing a single word. Tell me, to what extent did you fight with him, and how much of his HP did you take away so that I can redeploy? Almost. Cadillac was silent for a long time, and his throat squeezed out half a sentence with difficulty. Almost. Well, I think so too. After all, you have a great advantage from the beginning when you're under my command. However, to be able to fight with you to this extent, I should have almost reduced his HP by 1 point. Cadillac sighed deeply. What did you say? I said, I probably didn't even reduce his HP by 1 point. Cadillac smiled bitterly. The special armor-piercing arrow you prepared for me couldn't break his armor at all. The armor had no blind spots, and he even had poison immunity. He just attacked with his sword and his skill, and he almost killed me. Then you rolled and killed me. Are you satisfied? Impossible. This is impossible. Unless it is the sacred armor. Otherwise, this is impossible. The condition to obtain the sacred armor. The voice suddenly stopped, and Mr. Varley seemed to have fallen into some kind of silence. There's no such thing as impossible. My appearance here is the best proof. Cadillac wasn't too depressed because he returned to the starting point at this time. He even had a faint trace of joy. He only hated that he wasn't outside the chessboard to appreciate the flustered and exasperated owner of the castle at this time. Forget it. Mr. Varley spoke again after a while. Since he is wearing this sacred armor, then his specific class is confirmed. What? You still have a way to deal with it? Cadillac frowned subconsciously. Although the sacred armor is close to absolute physical defense, its resistance to magic is not high. Mr. Varley smiled at this time and said, "Since we know the opponent's strengths and weaknesses, it is easy to deal with. You still have a chance now. Anyway, the sacred armor is reset, and it is much more convenient to choose another class and combination. You can change your class to Shadow Sorcerer. Sacred armor. S resistance to magic is very ordinary, and its resistance to mental attacks is even worse. This is what Shadow Sorcerer is good at." Cadillac was silent for a while, but suddenly asked, "Let me ask you a question." "Go ahead." "Is there really only one resurrection of the dead in the card box?" Cadillac asked in a deep voice. "Only one," Mr. Varley said calmly. "Chessboard has its own rules. Cherish this opportunity. Next time, you won't be so lucky. I will answer you the same thing." Cadillac sneered. "Remember, if I lose, you will face the punishment roulette again. If I die, I will wait for you here." When Luaccio came, Mr. Sneeve was sitting silently on a dead tree on the ground. Mr. Varley's servant is resurrected and returned to the starting point. "I guessed it." Mr. Sneeve shook his head. "He is the owner of Chessboard, and it is unrealistic to defeat him so easily. However, it is already a good result to let him consume Resurrection of the Dead. For so many years, I don't know how many people have entered this chessboard, but I have only seen one guy consume Resurrection of the Dead." "What kind of person?" Boss Luo couldn't help but ask curiously. "It's a guy called Bohemia." Mr. Sneeve shook his head and said, "A guy with good luck, but it was useless. He lost in the end, and then he spun the punishment roulette. After that, he never appeared again. I heard that there is a non-punishment option in the punishment roulette." Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "No one has ever turned to the safe option." "I don't know." Mr. Sneeve shook his head. "At least, I have never seen it. By the way, from now on, you have to pay attention to those equipment that can increase your magic resistance." After this, Varley must have guessed that you have this set of sacred armor, and he will find a way to deal with you. Your armor's defense is indeed very strong, but its shortcomings are quite obvious. Magic attacks and mental attacks are your weaknesses. Mr. Sneeve, it seems that you have done a lot of research on this game. I have been studying it all the time. Mr. Sneeve gritted his teeth and said, "As long as there is a chance, I will watch the battle. I will watch it openly, and I will hide and peek. One by one, I've recorded all the function cards that have appeared before, and I have been studying Varley's action pattern. I have been out for a long time." Luaccio said at this time, "Mr. Gores is still taking care of the injured lady. We should go back and see him." "Oh, I remember." Sneeve nodded solemnly. "You'd better hurry up. After all, it is not a good thing to encounter this female elf who was shot by an arrow. Back then, it was because of this incident that I ended up in my current state. Can you tell me the development of this incident?" Mr. Sneeve stood up. "There is nothing that can't be said. You defeated Varley's servant and made him suffer such a big loss. I even saw the hope of revenge in you. I will tell you everything I know, and I will do my best to help you until Varley is defeated again. First, tell me the development of this incident." Boss Luo said calmly. Sneeve recalled at this time, "The injured elf you met has been living in the depths of Roaring Forest. You should know that the forest is actually very big. Somewhere in the deep forest, there is an elf tribe. They live in the forest for generations, guarding something, which is an important item that can be used to help the final challenge. You saved her, and soon, under her guidance, you will enter this elf tribe. After a series of investigations, you should encounter a few tests. In the end, I was stuck at the final test, so I missed the time to meet up with my companions and lost the game." "What exactly is it?" "I don't know." Sneeve shook his head. "Almost every time, this item will be obtained by Varley, so no one knows what is hidden here. But I have observed Varley for so many years, and he will go deep into the forest every time. So I'm sure that there must be an item to clear the game." Luaccio took out the slate he picked up on the road. "Mr. Sneeve, in the last game, have you seen this slate? Or something similar?" "What is this?" Sneeve looked at it in surprise, and after a while, he shook his head. I don't think I have seen this thing. It seems to be some kind of clue. Where did you get it? I have been studying the chessboard game. Although I dare not say I know everything, I may be able to give you some hints. He really tried hard to provide all the useful information he could. He didn't want to let go of any opportunity. I picked it up on the road, Luaccio said casually. It was buried in the soil. It was discovered because a corner was exposed in the battle. It seems to lead to here, Mr. Sneeve said in surprise. Is this the reason why you entered the roaring forest? Luaccio nodded. Most of it. Mr. Sneeve shook his head. Sorry, I don't know about this slate, but it leads to here. Maybe it has something to do with the important item. Wait, there seems to be some sound. With that, Mr. Sneeve's eyes suddenly became sharp. He directly lay on the ground with his ear close to the ground, and then looked at somewhere, pointing and saying, It's coming. Very fast footsteps. In front of him, a figure was rushing out quickly. It was Tina. Is this the twins? Mr. Sneeve was surprised when he saw the person clearly, and then he frowned. He just realized that he was now in the same team as the twins because of Boss Luo. She seems to be chased by something. She looks very scared. What is that? Behind the twin mates, Tina, there was a figure crawling at high speed, madly chasing after her. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that the figure crawling at high speed on the ground was actually a pair of little girls connected to each other. Their hands and feet were crawling quickly like geckos. Their eyes were sharp, and their mouths were open. They even constantly made rapid and sharp laughter while crawling. At this time, Tina's panicked eyes showed a touch of surprise. As if she caught a life-saving straw, the twins ran toward Luaccio at once. Help me! She had directly hidden behind Boss Luo and was about to grab his clothes. At this time, Boss Luo slightly stepped forward and the maid grabbed nothing. While Tina was stunned, a light shield was released from Luaccio's palm and directly covered the three of them. At this time, the conjoined girls who were crawling directly jumped out and hit the light shield. However, the moment the horrifying conjoined girls touched the light shield, their bodies suddenly dispersed into a gray fog and then disappeared. It seems to be all right. Luaccio waved his hand to remove the light shield and then turned to look at Tina. But Tina had directly fallen to the ground, and her eyes were tightly closed as if she had fainted. This, Mr. Sneeve frowned. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, Mr. Sneeve, can you carry Tina? It's not convenient for me. I'm the old man who can't move. Chapter 1789. On the way, Mr. Sneeve, who was carrying Tina on his back, suddenly said, What was that just now? He was talking about the conjoined freak girls who were chasing Tina. They suddenly turned into a mist and disappeared. Could it be that this is also an illusion caused by the poisonous gas in the roaring forest? Mr. Snaff frowned. But you're immune to poison. Logically speaking, the miasma shouldn't affect you. What is it? We will know when Miss Tina wakes up. Luaccio calmly said, Since we can't get the answer. That's true. Mr. Sneeve couldn't help but shake his head. People were like this. When they knew that it was useless to think hard, they still couldn't help but think hard. They couldn't help but care. You shouldn't have found a clue to the elf tribe. Sneeve simply changed the topic, about the mysterious place triggered by the elf girl who was shot by the arrow. You met me, so you obviously didn't find anything. Not to mention Tina. As for Gores, since he stayed in the same place, obviously he won't find anything. But you have it, right? I know the way. Mr. Sneeve directly gave the answer. If, after so many years, there is no change, Luaccio curiously asked, Everything here won't change. It's hard to say. Sneeve shook his head. The fixed place should be a cycle, but in some places time will also flow. For example, the roaring forest is likely to repeat the same day, but some towns outside the map will continue to develop, and it can record the servants' activities. Record the servants' activities? What do you mean? Boss Luo pondered. Snakel said, If you've been to a certain town and come into contact with the people there, you've left something behind. Then you can take it out in the same place next time. A town where time flowed normally was like a bank, and you were depositing things in the bank's vault. But remember, it's the next time you enter. In other words, you have to win in order to have a chance to enter again. It was Mr. Varley who won all the time. That's right. Sneeve nodded. He's the one who keeps winning, but it's also because of this that he can keep winning. This is because his accumulation will only increase, and the more he accumulates, the easier it will be for him to win. This is an endless cycle. To hear you say that, Boss Luo suddenly laughed and said, "This place is like a complete world. Perhaps our arrival here is like that of an outsider." Mr. Sneeve shook his head. Maybe this is just the magic of the chessboard. A complete world? In that case, this chessboard is unimaginable. I believe that Wally can't master such a chessboard. I see, Mr. Gores. Boss Luo pointed forward and into the conversation. Dr. Gores was sitting beside the fire, resting with his eyes closed. As for the injured Miss Elf, she still hadn't woken up. She was covered with a coat that was taken off by Dr. Gores. "You're back." Dr. Gores opened his eyes and wasn't surprised by Sneeve's arrival. Instead, he said directly, "Tina's condition is a bit abnormal. So is Tiff's. Nelson told me that Tiff also had an abnormal condition outside. Tina, maybe you encountered something when you were exploring. We met a terrifying Siamese freak. It kept chasing after Tina." Snakel gave a brief account of what had happened. Conjoined freak? Dr. Giles frowned as if he had thought of something. He blurted out, "Conjoined twin girls? How do you know?" Sneeve asked in surprise. Dr. Gores shook his head. "I'm just guessing." "Don't worry. If that's the case, Tina will be fine after she wakes up." "How can you be sure?" Sneeve couldn't help but be surprised. The brain is a very magical thing. Dr. Gores said indifferently, "When it encounters something too dangerous, it will automatically produce a defensive response. When she wakes up, she will probably forget about it." Dr. Gores suddenly looked at Boss Luo and smiled. "Congratulations, you successfully defeated Mr. Wally's servant. This is the second time I saw him use Resurrection of the Dead. You have accomplished a great feat, Mr. Gores. It seems that you also want to see Mr. Wally lose this game." Boss Luo asked curiously. "No, I just don't want to see myself lose this game." Dr. Gores shrugged. Then he looked at Sneeve. "I heard that you have clues about the plot triggered by this injured elf. First, we need to enter the elf tribe where she lives. I know the location." Mr. Sneeve glanced at the female elf who fainted on the ground and said indifferently, "Also, if I remember correctly, her name should be Mayfair. You have a good memory." Dr. Gores smiled and said, "Then let's go. The light circle hasn't disappeared yet, and we don't know when it will disappear. We have to take a few more steps before it disappears. This way, we can save some action points." Mr. Sneeve nodded and immediately looked at Boss Luo. After opening his mouth, he accepted his fate and carried Tina on his back. Dr. Gores was stunned. He looked at the unconscious female elf Mayfair and pointed at himself. Mr. Snaff nodded his head in affirmation. Dr. Gores widened his eyes and pointed at himself again with an expression of disbelief. Mr. Sneeve still nodded affirmatively. "Okay, I'll do it." Dr. Gores shook his head and carried Elf Murphy on his back. As for why he didn't point at the empty-handed Boss Luo, the doctor saw Mr. Sneeve carry Tina all the way back, and now he took the initiative to carry her, so he didn't bother to ask. Forward. In the dark ruins of the town, there were rogues in tattered, white robes everywhere. There was no trace of life in the town, just like a huge graveyard. Suddenly, a section of the street in the ruins suddenly cracked open. Then, an arm that didn't have a trace of blood suddenly stretched out from the cracked floor. It fiercely grabbed onto the stone tiles on the ground. Then, it did the same with its other arm. It crawled out bit by bit. Soon, a slightly withered figure was bathed in the moonlight. Tang Tianlin, looked at his hands blankly. Suddenly, a wandering figure in a tattered robe suddenly pounced towards him. Tang Tianlin subconsciously reached out with his hand and actually directly grabbed the neck of this tattered robed figure. He found that he grabbed something like a spiritual body. His hand tightened subconsciously, and the spiritual body instantly disappeared in his hand. Then a few silver coins fell on the ground. Its power has increased so much. Tang Tianlin was surprised. He couldn't remember what happened to him. The only thing he remembered was that Miss Gong Lina, as his master, had given him the order to die. It was very difficult for him to go against his master's orders. Even if he did, Gong Lina would probably think of a way to make him continuously collide with those demons that he couldn't deal with. In the end, he would still die, so he could only bet that Gong Lina had a special purpose for sending him to die. You finally woke up? After so many rounds, it seems that the effect is not bad. While he was thinking, Gong Lina's voice came as expected. Tang Tianlin frowned, looking at the information given by the chessboard, and said in a deep voice, "This is the reason why you sent me to die. The profession change of the Death Walker? This is one of the best professions in the entire Braveheart game series. Although you have just completed the profession change LV1, you have seen its power. Before, you couldn't even deal with a ghost here." Gong Lina chuckled. "How is it? Are you satisfied?" "If that's the case." Tang Tianlin suddenly sighed and muttered to himself, "I've actually died once. You won't die next time." Gong Lina chuckled. "Because you will keep winning, you can start now. There's a place in front that is very suitable for you to level up. You often play this game, right?" Tang Tianlin was a little uneasy about his current situation. "I can get one of the best professions in the game so easily." "Is it strange?" Gong Lina suddenly said, "As long as you send more people to play this game with Wally, you will know more each time. After a long time, you will know more." "Send more people?" Subconsciously, Tang Tianlin remembered that when he explored the castle and passed through the Rose Wall, he saw the corpses buried in the soil of the Rose Wall. Those people, could it be? Well, don't ask about things you shouldn't ask. Gong Lina said indifferently, "I have always been generous to people who can help me. After you win this game and leave, you will be grateful to me. Go, my Death Walker." Tang Tianlin's throat gulped subconsciously. But at this moment, his left arm faintly felt a burning sensation. This burning sensation didn't seem to be caused by the chessboard, but came from his own body. His mutated left arm that was implanted with perfect human cells. Mr. Sneeve had been leading the way in the front. On the way, Boss Luo chopped down a few little monsters that could make whining sounds and drop some small items. Then, the team came in front of cave. A stream was flowing out from the depths of the cave. The sound of flowing water was particularly clear in front of the cave entrance. The elf tribe is in this cave. Dr. Gores couldn't help but frown. How come I never knew that there is such a tribe in the Roaring Forest? How many times have you participated in the game? Mr. Sneeve suddenly asked. About 20 times, Dr. Gores thought for a while and said, "I've been to the Roaring Forest at least 5 times, but to be honest, this is the first time I met Murphy the elf." "If I didn't guess wrong, only Wally knows the way to meet Murphy," Sneeve said seriously, "because he basically comes every time. In fact, in the previous games, Wally will only team up with you after leaving the Roaring Forest." "Gores, I don't believe that you have never doubted it." The doctor just waved his hand casually and said, "But in fact, you have met it once before. And now we also met it once. That can only mean that we just met it by accident." Sneeve said indifferently, "It's just a so-called lucky bastard, nothing to be proud of." This was not as simple as a lucky bastard. Dr. Girls glanced at the temporary team leader who was not far away from him. The items dropped from those monsters that were killed with a single slash were not something that could be dropped by pure luck, right? Like the power gem that could increase the strength attribute by 30%. Was it really just a small item? This was the chessboard game, and it was Mr. Wally's chessboard game, but until now, Dr. Gores had a feeling that he was following the process of clearing the game. Gores shook his head secretly, then looked around and said doubtfully, "But it doesn't look like someone lives here." "Sneeve, maybe you remember the wrong place? After all, for you it has been so long since the last game. Whether I remembered it wrongly or not, you will know when you walk in." Dr. Gores was about to say something, but he suddenly stopped. He looked serious and said, "It seems that someone came out from inside. You are right. At least there are people here. They should be people who came out to find Murphy. We will wait here for them to come out and meet them." Mr. Sneeve said indifferently, "They will take us in. Let's hide." Unexpectedly, Boss Luo suddenly said, "Hide." Mr. Snaff couldn't help but open his mouth. "Hide for what?" "The elf tribe is deep in the cave, and we have to pass through a barrier. Without the elf's guidance, we can't pass through the barrier. Let's hide first," Boss Luo said quickly. Then he looked around and walked quickly to the back of a big stone. Dr. Gores followed him subconsciously, mainly because he found that since they formed a team, he could always pick up many useful things behind this temporary team leader. Really? Mr. Sneeve looked at the entrance of the cave and felt the faint sound getting closer. He looked at his teammates who were hiding behind the big rock. Finally, he carried Tina on his back and hid behind the big rock as well. Not long after, a few figures quickly walked out of the cave. Surprisingly, they were the same as Mayfair and had the characteristics of elves. They whispered something and left the cave after a while. "Why did you avoid the elves who led the way?" Mr. Sneeve frowned and asked. "I'm just a little curious." Luaccio thought for a while and said, "Who shot this elf lady?" "She didn't get shot by Cade's arrow." "Who shot her?" "Of course, it's the enemy," Mr. Sneeve blurted out, but he stopped instantly. "Wait, who is the enemy of the elves in the roaring forest? There should only be monsters here." "If that's the case," Dr. Girth frowned and said, "I've been to this roaring forest several times, but I've never met a monster that uses bows and arrows. Let alone bows and arrows. There aren't even any low-intelligence ogres that use wooden sticks. Was this arrow shot by an elf?" "Someone in the elf tribe wants to kill Murphy," Mr. Sneeve couldn't help but say hurriedly. Then cold sweat started to appear on his forehead. "How could this be? If this is the case, then we'll know soon whether it's true or not." Boss Luo looked at Dr. Gores. To be exact, he was looking at the elf lady who was on his back. The elf lady's eyelids moved slightly, and she seemed to be waking up. Chapter 1790. Elf Mayfair soon woke up. She was quite nervous when she saw several strangers in front of her. If it wasn't for the fact that she was heavily injured, something unpleasant might have happened. "We saved you in the woods," Dr. Gores said directly. "We are foreign adventurers." Obviously, Mayfair did not trust them immediately. She was even more alert as she looked at everyone and sized up her current situation. When she realized that she was at the entrance of the cave, a trace of panic flashed across her face. She struggled to stand up and seemed to want to escape. Luaccio saw this and said directly, "Not long ago, we saw a few male elves coming out from inside. If you go out now, you may meet them." His words made Mayfair's movements slow down. Dr. Gores and Mr. Sneeve looked at each other and thought of what they had discussed before. It seemed that Mayfair was really injured by her own kind, and it was not an accident. This development was completely different from the incident that Sneeve committed decades ago. In fact, decades ago, when he joined the game and found Mayfair in the roaring forest and finally successfully brought her back to the tribe, Mayfair didn't wake up. It was only because he brought back the injured Mayfair. To be precise, it was Mayfair who was brought back by Gerald, the leader of the demon hunting squad who was his follower. That was why he was treated with respect by the elf tribe. The one who really came into contact with the elf tribe in the roaring forest was Gerald, the captain of the demon hunting team who had died in the chessboard game. Snake only knew about this place from Gerald through the connection between his master and servant. "You want to send me in?" Mayfair was silent for a while and frowned. Boss Luo nodded and said, "You are injured. We plan to send you back to where you live. There is no problem." "I can go back." Mayfair shook her head. "I just escaped from there." "Escaped?" Dr. Gores frowned. "Why? Isn't that where you live?" Mayfair didn't answer Dr. Gore's question. Instead, she quickly said, "Come with me. If you stay here for a long time, they will find you. Every elf living here is good at tracking." Gores and Sneeve looked at Luaccio together. He was the leader of this servant team. "If this is a plot, we can only follow the plot." Luaccio quickly gave an answer. Although Mayfair woke up, it was still not convenient for her to move. She could only pick up a branch as a crutch and then let Dr. Gores help her move. Very quickly, under Mayfair's lead, everyone arrived at an abnormally dark area where the trees were especially dense. It was very difficult for the sunlight to penetrate through the layers of leaves in this place. Only some mushrooms that grew in the withered trees could slightly illuminate this place. According to the direction, this place seems to be the direction that Tina explored before. Dr. Gores suddenly stopped. He found a piece of broken cloth in a dead tree branch. The cloth seemed to be from Tina's clothes. It should be that during the process of running, it was accidentally caught here. Where do you want to take us? Mr. Sneeve couldn't help but ask in a deep voice. Elf Mayfair quickly said at this time, in front of us is the forbidden area. Everyone in the tribe is forbidden to enter this place. Only in the forbidden area, they won't catch up with us, and we will be relatively safe. It's because of you that we can be relatively safe. Mr. Sneeve shook his head and said, they attacked you and wanted to catch you, but you didn't tell us why they did this to you. I don't want to answer this question. Mayfair glanced at Sneeve and said indifferently, your eyes are full of hatred. The light of your soul is about to be extinguished. The whole forest hates you. Sneeve couldn't help but be startled and immediately frowned deeply. It doesn't matter if you don't tell him. Dr. Gore showed a charming smile at this time. He had such a young and handsome face, mixed with the unique pale skin of a vampire and light purple lips. It even had a kind of abnormal beauty. You can tell me, and I'll keep it a secret for you. I smell blood on you that almost makes me want to vomit. Mayfair still shook his head. Compared to him, the forest hates you more. Dr. Gores didn't look defeated at all. He just smiled and said, okay, and our team leader, how do you plan to evaluate him? Speaking of the smell of blood, Boss Luo, as the leader of the servant team, killed one monster with a sword along the way. Speaking of the smell of blood, he was probably the one with the strongest smell of blood in the team. I can tell him. Mayfair was silent for a moment, then slowly said, me? Boss Luo looked at the elf lady curiously. Him? Dr. Gores opened his mouth and said, although this is a good news, I want to know why. Mayfair said indifferently, because he is very beautiful, much more beautiful than you. So, it's because of his appearance? Dr. Gores looked at Luaccio from head to toe. As a doctor, and a doctor with good achievements in the field of modification surgery, he thought that every operation he had done on his face in the past was quite perfect. His face could withstand the test. How could it be compared to him? My beautiful face? I've been seriously injured. Dr. Gores said seriously, I seriously suspect that your aesthetic and the correct aesthetic are misaligned. Mephistopheles said indifferently, the beauty I'm talking about is not purely in terms of appearance. If your eyes are clear enough, then you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. What is it? Mayfair said. You didn't see it, but wherever he went, every blade of grass and every tree radiated a joyous aura. It was as if the forest had been taken care of. The whole forest emitted a happy heartbeat. Dr. Gore shrugged and said, I only saw these glowing mushrooms and the smell of rotten leaves and feces. Here we are. Mayfair pointed at an ancient tree in front and ended the discussion. At this time, what appeared in front of them was a small wooden house on the branches of an ancient tree. A tree house. Mayfair climbed up skillfully at this time and looked back, saying indifferently, come up, I don't have much time. Boss Luo nodded and was the first to take the initiative to follow him. Mr. Sneeve hesitated for a while and was the second to follow. But at this time, Dr. Gores suddenly put his hand on his shoulder, whispering, Tina should have entered this tree house. As he said, Dr. Gores pointed at the corner of the wooden steps on the trunk. There was also a small piece of cloth hanging here. Be careful. Mr. Sneeve immediately calmed down. The current situation is completely different from what I know, and I don't know what will happen next. The interior space of the treehouse was not only narrow, but also limited in height. Even if he bent down, his head would almost touch the ceiling. There were a few simple wooden boxes in the surroundings and a short round table. After coming in, Mayfair directly sat on the ground. She then took out a worn-out notebook and a quill pen from one of the wooden boxes. With one tap, she poured out a bottle of ink. Mayfair didn't pay attention to others, directly opening the worn-out notebook and then dipping it in ink to write something. She wrote very quickly. But what was strange was that the content written by the quill that had been dipped in ink did not appear on the pages of the notebook. To be precise, the ink was instantly absorbed by the quill and then disappeared as soon as each stroke appeared. After a short while, the doctor simply gave up prying and turned to check on Tina's condition. After a while, Mayfair sighed, closing the notebook and then carefully putting it back into the wooden box. Then she looked at Luaccio. "I'm sorry for ignoring you, but I have to do this, because I can only rely on this notebook, and I can only remember what happened today tomorrow." Finally, the doctor heard the elf lady speak, but now he directly rolled his eyes. Anyway, he and Sneeve are the guys who were despised by this elf. You can only remember what happened today tomorrow. Boss Luo now considered this sentence, thinking for a while. "Miss Mayfair, you mean after today, you will forget what happened today?" "That's right." Mayfair nodded. "Precisely speaking, at the end of each day, I will forget what happened that day. I don't know when it started, but I've been living in the same day. As long as today is over, everything will return to the way it was when I woke up today." This seemed to be a rather strange topic, but Sneeve and Dr. Gores were not surprised. Because they were all people who understood the content of the game, they knew that the flow of time in different places in the game would not be constant. Even in some places where there would be special plots, there would be situations that would repeat constantly. The purpose was to allow different servants to trigger quests every time they arrived. Then they quickly became surprised. The reason for the surprise was that according to Mayfair's words, she, who was supposed to be the key trigger character of the repeated plot, seemed to have discovered this point. "Wait," Dr. Gores suddenly frowned. "You said that you can only let tomorrow know what happened today through the diary, and you also said that every day is repeated and everything will return to the original state. Then, why can the diary you wrote record what happened the day before and not disappear?" "This place is special," Mayfair said slowly. "This forbidden place is also special. It is an exception that can help me record this. As for the reason, I am not very clear, but I have been looking for the truth. Since this place can help you record what happened that day, it means that there is some kind of power here to resist repetition." Dr. Gores pondered. "Then why don't you stay here and spend today?" "It's useless." Mayfair shook her head and said, "I have tried. When today is about to end, I will lose consciousness and wake up in my original home. As usual, I will prepare to escape from the tribe, and then I will come here by accident and finally find the diary in the wooden box, and then I will know what happened yesterday." "You will remember what happened yesterday?" Luaccio thought for a while and asked. "No, I still can't remember." Mayfair shook her head again and said, "But the handwriting in the diary is mine. In addition, the yesterday me will also write something that the today me has to believe, something that only I know. In the end, no matter how unbelievable it is, I can only choose to believe it." "What did you write just now?" Luaccio thought for a while and asked. "Meeting you guys," Mayfair said directly. "This diary records everything that I write down every day. I don't want to miss out on anything different. It might be able to help me get out of this predicament. In fact, according to the contents of this diary, I should meet the person who saved me every once in a while, and then return to this treehouse. But this time, it's a little different." "What's the difference?" Mr. Sneeve seemed to think of something, and his expression became a little anxious. Mayfair looked at Sneeve with some displeasure, then looked at Boss Luo and said, "Every once in a while, only one person will save me, but this time it is more than one person. This is the difference. It's Wally. It must be him." Mr. Sneeve suddenly stood up at this time, and his head directly hit the ceiling, but he didn't care about the pain. He said excitedly, "Every time the person who saved you should be Wally's servant. Only he knows how to take this step. I didn't send you back. I didn't send you back at all. I was wrong from the beginning." "Who is Wally?" Mayfair's eyes were full of doubts at this time. "He is a devil." Mr. Sneeve sat down again and said in a deep voice, "The devil who plays with people's hearts and makes people fall into despair as the source of happiness. You also look like a devil." Mayfair looked at Mr. Sneeve and said at this time. Mr. Sneeve didn't care at this time. He reached out and grabbed the elf lady's slender arm and said in a deep voice, "Tell me, every time you brought Wally's servant here, what else did you do?" This action obviously disturbed the elf lady's inner thoughts. Her lips moved slightly, and she quickly said something. Then a green light flashed on Mayfair's body, and then Mr. Sneeve's body was directly overturned by something. It seemed that he flew out of the door and fell directly under the tree. The light on Mayfair's body then disappeared, and she looked a lot tired. Then she directly fell into the arms of Boss Luo, who was sitting next to her. Boss Luo quickly stretched out his hand and pulled the round, low table directly. So, the elf lady could only lie directly on the table. Dr. Gores opened his mouth at this time. This guy, he deserved to not have a lover. Chapter 1791. When Mr. Sneeve appeared at the door of the treehouse while rubbing his waist, he saw Elf Mayfair, who was rubbing her forehead. It seemed that something had happened in the treehouse while he was falling from the tree. But after that incident, he was a little more fearful of Mayfair. After calming down, Mr. Sneeve sat down silently. The atmosphere suddenly became a little quiet, but Dr. Goles quickly opened his mouth and said, "Miss Mayfair, you said that before this, every once in a while, the diary would record that someone saved you when you were injured by an arrow. In other words, every time someone saved you, you would return to the treehouse again. In other words, you would only come here twice in a day, right?" "That's right." Mayfair nodded. Dr. Jules asked again, "Then, did you write down in the diary what you would do next every time you did this?" Mayfair shook her head. "There is no record in the diary, so I don't know what would happen. But I think there must be some reason that prevented me from coming to the treehouse for the third time. I have thought of many possibilities. Maybe it was because the time had come, or because I died, but there is no way to prove it." "You said this place is forbidden." Dr. Gores muttered. "What on earth exists here that makes you, your tribe, so afraid of this place?" "According to the legend in the tribe, there is a terrible monster sleeping here," Mayfair said in a low voice. "This monster can't be awakened, or it will bring a destructive disaster to the forest, or even the whole world." "Do you know how big the world is?" Boss Luo suddenly asked at this time. Mayfair shook her head. "I have lived in the tribe since I was young and have never left the forest. I don't know how big the outside world is. I want to see how big it is." "You said you want to leave the tribe." Boss Luo said, "Is this the reason?" "Only a small percentage of them." Mayfair shook his head and said, "But the real reason is that I don't want to become a sacrifice for the tribe. Tomorrow, I'm talking about today, tomorrow, I will become a sacrifice and be sent to our God." "God?" Boss Luo blinked. "Your gods. What are you not willing to sacrifice yourself for?" "If it was really a god, I would be willing," Mayfair said excitedly. "But that's not the case at all. Everyone was biased. It's not our god. It's just a monster with the ability to transform. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes that day, when it revealed its original appearance and forcibly ate the previous child as a sacrifice alive. I told the elders, told everyone, but no one believed me. They even imprisoned me. You should have the ability to leave the roaring forest." Dr. Gores thought about it and said, "Not counting the today, when no one appeared to save you. Every once in a while, someone will come to save you, right? Then, from the time you were injured and woke up until the end of the day, you had enough time to leave the forest. Even if you subtracted the time you returned to the treehouse to write in your diary for the second time, there was still enough time." "I don't know." Mayfair shook his head and said, "Maybe you're right, there was enough time, but I still woke up as usual today, which proves that this is a failure. I didn't succeed in leaving the forest in the end. Maybe there's even a worse result. Even if you leave the forest, when the time is up, everything will return to normal," Boss Luo said calmly. "This is a worse result. I don't know what I should do next." Mayfair hugged his knees and leaned against the corner of the wall. "This is a nightmare that I can't escape from. But maybe it's better this way. At least I don't have to wait for today to pass. Tomorrow, I will become the monster's food." At that moment, several people in the servant team were slightly moved because the prompt from chessboard appeared. This seems to be a strange time node. We always subconsciously forget some important things. Please find out the reason why the elf Mayfair repeated every day. Excellent people are always good at meeting unknown challenges. At the end of the prompt, there was a choice whether to accept the mission or not. Obviously, as the leader, the servant girl directly chose the option to solve the problem. This was not beyond the expectation of Dr. Gores and Sneeve. If they were to make a choice, they would not hesitate too much. Therefore, at this time, they were convinced that the mission obtained from Mayfair was a special mission that could only be triggered by Wally and was completed almost every time. The special item that could effectively help the servant defeat the final guardian must be obtained through this mission. Maybe there is a way to quickly solve your current predicament. Dr. Gore smiled and said, "The way to let you pass today and not die in a monster's mouth." "What way?" Mayfair raised his head in an instant. Dr. Gore smiled and said, "Since all this started when you wanted to escape from the fate of being a sacrifice, then the way to end it is very likely to end your fate as a sacrifice. How to end this fate in the fastest way? As long as the god of your tribe disappears, then the meaning of you being a sacrifice no longer exists." "You mean?" Mayfair was shocked. You're going to give that monster." Dr. Gores nodded and directly pointed at the team captain, Boss Luo. "Yes, the simplest way is to directly eliminate the monster that ruled your tribe. Don't look at us like this. This guy is very powerful." "Him?" Mayfair looked at Luaccio with suspicion. He was so beautiful that he could make the forest exude a cheerful atmosphere. He was more like an elf than an elf. There was not a trace of violence in him. "Yes, that's him." Dr. Gores said, "Don't look at his gentle appearance. When he is fierce, he is the most violent guy in our village. One sword, one monster, one monster. Are you afraid?" "Really, really?" Mayfair looked at Luaccio with excitement. "Can you really help me deal with the monster in my tribe? I can go to your tribe and have a look." Luaccio nodded. "Before your time resets." "That's great." The excited Miss Elf crawled over and was about to grab Boss Luo's hands to express her gratitude at this moment. Dr. Gores thought that he couldn't avoid it this time, but he realized that he was too naive, or the world was too complicated. What did he see? The wooden floor of the treehouse suddenly broke at the position of the elf lady. Her body sank, and she directly fell under the tree, causing Mr. Sneeve to feel extremely comfortable. At this moment, the twin maid, Tina, slowly woke up. "Where is this place?" Tina looked at everyone blankly. She rubbed her forehead and asked softly, "Why are you all here?" She forgot what happened after they separated. Her memory seemed to stop at the time before she came into contact with the treehouse. This was Dr. Gore's speculation. Before this, he had already speculated that Tina had entered the treehouse and confirmed it. "You really don't remember what happened before?" Mr. Sneeve frowned. "Do you remember anything at all? When we met you, you were being chased by a monster." Dr. Gores directly interrupted Mr. Sneeve. "Tina, try to recall why you were chased by a monster." "I really can't remember." The servant girl shook her head. "I have a terrible headache. Since you can't remember, then don't think about it for the time being." Dr. Gores said quickly, "My mother is about to enter the elf tribe. There may be a battle. You should rest well. It's not a big deal." "Okay, Dr. Gores." The servant girl nodded obediently. Dr. Gores said, "Since you've woken up, you should help this elf lady. It's more appropriate this way." The servant girl nodded obediently and then walked to Mayfair's side to help her. Sneeve saw this and frowned. "Gores, why did you stop me from talking about the conjoined strange twins?" Dr. Gores said indifferently, "This is a bad memory for both Tina and Tiff. They were abandoned because they were conjoined. You don't want to know what they looked like when they left that family." Mr. Sneeve couldn't help but sneer. "Why, as a vampire, do you have the so-called compassion?" "Doctor, under the flower wall in the castle courtyard, there are many masterpieces of yours." Dr. Gores was unmoved. "Why? Do you want to seek justice for those souls buried under the flower wall?" "If possible." Sneeve sneered and ignored Dr. Gores. He looked behind him and found that the Captain Boss Luo didn't follow him. He stopped under the tree and looked up at the wooden house on the tree. "What happened?" Sneeve walked to Boss Luo and asked in confusion. "The floor has been restored." Boss Luo said calmly. "What?" Mr. Sneeve looked up in shock and found that the hole that Mayfair fell from had disappeared. At this moment, there was a faint sound from the depths of the Forbidden Land. It sounded like the howling of the wind, roaring, the sound of something roaring. Angry, angry roaring. It's the devil. It's the devil in the forbidden land. Mayfair's face was pale, and her body couldn't help but tremble. She urged, "Let's go. Hurry up." Boss Luo looked down at the slate fragment in his hand. The slate was about to move, as if it wanted to get out of his hand. The direction was obviously the depths of the forbidden land. "Do you want to go in?" Sneeve suddenly frowned. He vaguely sensed Luocchio's thoughts. But Luocchio shook his head. "No hurry. Since I promised Miss Mayfair, let's go to the tribe first. We can come here again. By the way, Mr. Sneeve, can you still see illusions?" "I'm fine." Sneeve was stunned and immediately said, "Didn't you give me the antidote? Why do you ask?" "That's good." Boss Luo just smiled. "Let's not talk about it. Let's follow them." "Okay." Castle, banquet hall. The round was still going on, but the circle of light in the roaring forest on the chessboard still didn't disappear at this time. The serving cards of Miss Maid's team were still moving in the circle of light. At this time, Mr. Varley, who was controlling his servants to fight in the wild, suddenly smiled and said, "Speaking of which, do you know the origin of the name, Roaring Forest?" "Mr. Varley is joking." Miss Maid smiled slightly. "How would we know the origin of this deception game for the first time? It is said that there is an extremely terrifying devil sealed in the Roaring Forest." The owner of the castle smiled. "And this devil is not a native of the chessboard. It was sealed from the outside in the chessboard and couldn't get out. Just like Mr. Cor, who was sucked into the chessboard before." Miss Maid said indifferently, "I don't know about this." Mr. Varley said quite casually, "After all, this devil existed before I got this chessboard. Speaking of which, this chessboard is really magical." Miss Maid chuckled and said, "I don't know how Mr. Varley got this chessboard. Many people want to know this secret." Mr. Varley looked at Miss Maid and suddenly smiled. "If you win, I will tell you. Then I am looking forward to it." At this time, Black Dragon and Black Hound, who had given up the right to bet, lazily lying on the floor, suddenly raised their heads and looked around. But Miss Maid glanced at them at this time, and Black Hound and Black Dragon suddenly quieted down and lay down again. But their ears were close. It seemed like they were afraid. Afraid of something. In the dim corridor of the ancient castle, a rat that was stealing food flashed by, perhaps because it had eaten too much of the abnormal food in this ancient castle. This rat was obviously stronger than ordinary rats. Its eyes even glowed with a hint of red light. But suddenly, the huge rat was rolled up by something. It seemed to be the roots of some plants. At this time, the depths of the dusky long corridor were already covered with the roots of these plants, densely packed. They seemed to be in the process of growing without end. Chapter 1792. A bumpy wall appeared in front of them. It was actually one of the ends of the cave. "There is no road here." Dr. Gores reached out to touch the stone wall and found that the wall was solid. Mayfair also reached out to touch the stone wall at this time. Her finger began to draw something on the stone wall. It seemed to be a symbol. Dr. Gores looked at it a few more times and secretly remembered the movement of Mayfair's finger. "This wall is the door to the elf tribe," Mr. Sneeve said coldly. "Only the elves have the way to open it. Even if you remember this symbol, you don't have the corresponding power to open it." Dr. Gores shrugged and didn't seem to care much. Mayfair looked at Sneeve at this time and asked doubtfully, "You seem to be very familiar with our tribe?" "I have been here before," Sneeve said indifferently. Many years ago." "You are human?" Mayfair suddenly asked. "Of course." Mr. Sneeve nodded. Mayfair was surprised. "You're really a human. You look like you're in your 60s or 70s. Come to think of it, I was already in the tribe before you were born. If you've been to the tribe before, I should have an impression of you." Mr. Sneeve said perfunctorily, "Maybe you were not there at that time, so you don't know. Today, you also temporarily left the tribe and just came back." Mayfair wanted to say something, but the stone wall had changed. The entrance to the elf tribe was about to open. Mayfair had no choice but to remind everyone, "After we enter, you must follow me closely. Also, try not to make a sound. There's a small forest on the road to the village. The sleeping trees there hate ear-piercing sounds the most. If they are woken up, they will become quite irritable. Having said that, Mr. Sneeve had already stepped into the entrance one step ahead. Mayfair was shocked and had to rush in. The others followed one by one. Before entering, Dr. Gores suddenly looked back at Boss Luo and said, "You seem to be looking forward to it. You're about to smile." "Maybe," Boss Luo said casually, "because this kind of team adventure is always full of fun." "Is it really full of fun, or just—" Dr. Gores squinted and said, "It is only full of fun for you." "Is there a difference?" Boss Luo asked back. Dr. Gores chuckled. "There is no difference. I hope this kind of fun can last forever." After that, the doctor walked into the entrance and disappeared in a blink of an eye, leaving Boss Luo outside. He said, "Let's go in too." After Boss Luo passed through the entrance, he found that it was actually a sunny place with hills, grasslands, and forests. He could even see some smoke rising not far away. Fortunately, the people who went out to catch me haven't returned yet. Mayfair looked around and said quickly, "Let's go. Let's leave the quiet forest first. The elves here don't seem to live very densely." Boss Luo asked curiously. Mayfair explained, "Most of them live in the village. Some live outside the village because of their personality or interests. My house is at the bottom of that hill." "Does Miss Mayfair have a family?" Mayfair shook her head and said, "My family has passed away. They died of old age. My parents gave birth to me when they were 400 years old. This is considered old age for elves who have an average lifespan of 500 years. So, you're at least 100 years old?" Dr. Gores thought for a while and said, "I'm 173 years old now." Mayfair said indifferently, "Of course, it's only for today me." Dr. Gores smiled and said, "Actually, being trapped in the same day all the time should be able to do a lot of things. There's a movie where the protagonist is trapped in a snowy town. Because the same things happen every day, he easily reached the peak of his life." "What's a movie?" Mayfair asked subconsciously. "Then did this person survive the day?" "How'd he survive?" Dr. Gores said with a strange smile. "He survived. After he found his true love and successfully made love with her, the curse was lifted. He finally welcomed the arrival of a new day hand in hand with his beloved. Miss Mayfair, maybe you can try this method. Love is the most powerful force in the world." "That's great." The elf lady unexpectedly showed a yearning look, but clapping for love can break the repetitive curse. "This is really incredible." Dr. Gores said patiently, "But you haven't tried it. How do you know this method won't work? Besides, even if this method doesn't work, being able to find the happiness of your true love is already a kind of luck, isn't it?" "Yes." Mephistopheles nodded seriously and said, "I didn't expect a guy like you who reeks of blood to be able to say such words. You're starting to change your view of me, right?" Dr. Gores said with a smile, "I admit that my hands are indeed stained with countless blood. But let me ask you, which doctor hasn't touched blood with his hands?" "Doctor, are you a doctor?" Mayfair said in surprise. "You're a doctor? Speaking of which, Miss Mayfair's injury was also treated by me." Dr. Gores said with a smile, "If you don't believe me, you can ask them." Sneeve rolled his eyes. In fact, he didn't have a good impression of Mayfair, or rather, he didn't have a good impression of this tribe. If it wasn't for this tribe, he wouldn't have missed the time. He was even happy to see Gores teasing Mayfair. "Did he really save me?" Mayfair looked directly at Boss Luo. "Tell me, I believe you. It was Mr. Gores who treated your wound." Boss Luo nodded. "As for his profession, he is indeed a doctor. That's all I know for now." Mayfair nodded. When she looked at Gores, her gaze softened a little, saying seriously, "Well, if necessary, I'll consider your method. But I won't remember what happened today after I wake up. With only a little time left, I don't know where to find my true love. Besides, how can feelings be so casual? I want my future husband to be a brave, righteous, and kind person. Now, I better think about how to deal with the monster in the village." "It lives in the village?" Boss Luo asked directly. Mephistopheles pointed at another hill. "Over there, there's a shrine for the gods on the mountain. It lives there." The hill where the temple was located was not far from Mayfair's home. It was even a connected hill. We should kill it now. Dr. Gore said confidently. You have to believe that we have a terrifying power here. Mayfair shook her head. It's better not to go during the day. It sleeps during the day and only wakes up at night. So, during the day, the temple is guarded by the bravest elves of our tribe. I only want to expose its impersonation of a god, not to kill my people. You're helping me, and I don't want to see blood. Sneeve sneered. Why don't you sneak in and kill it when it's sleeping? When it wakes up at night, won't it be more difficult to find a chance to kill it? Your naivety will only put you in more danger. This, Mayfair couldn't help but hesitate. Boss Luo said, Miss Mayfair, is there any way to avoid your people's patrol and go directly into the temple? Yes, but it's not an easy way. Mayfair shook her head. I don't recommend it. It's the trial road, Mr. Sneeve said expressionlessly. If it's this road, I know how to go through it. You know? Mayfair was shocked. Mr. Sneeve snorted. Not only do I know, I've even passed through this trial path before. I know how to go through it, so it's decided. We'll go through the trial path and enter the temple. I think before the fake god wakes up, we'll be able to walk in front of it and kill it quietly. The trial road is the most important place in our tribe, besides the temple. How can you pass it? You're just a human? Mayfair said in disbelief. That's impossible. People who pass the trial road shouldn't look like you. This is the truth, no matter what I look like. Sneeve said coldly. If we don't go through the trial road, then whether it's day or night, we will always meet your people, and fighting is inevitable. You decide for yourself. Oh, Sneeve, this is the Sneeve I know. Dr. Jurl said with a smile at this time. This kind of annoying tone all the time, it's definitely you. Then, make a decision, Captain. The last words were said while looking at Boss Luo. Boss Luo thought at this time and said, Then let's go through the trial road. I still think it's too dangerous. Mayfair shook her head and immediately gritted her teeth. But if you insist, I'll go with you. Dr. Gores, Sneeve and I, are we really in the same team as this temporary servant captain? Then let's go. Dr. Jurls shook his head. He touched his cheek as if he was thinking about something as he felt some kind of trauma. He felt that he needed to seek some comfort, so he walked to the silent twin maid, Tina. What are you thinking about, Tina? The maid said subconsciously, Doctor, look at these sleeping trees. Don't they look like the willows in the courtyard of the castle, deep inside the flower wall? Not like. Dr. Gores frowned at this time. They are the whacking willows in the courtyard transplanted from here? Tina was a little surprised. Dr. Gores thought for a while and said, It's not surprising. After all, the things here can be taken out. Mr. Varley basically enters the roaring forest every time, so it's not surprising that he took away the seeds of the sleeping trees. The maid nodded, then lowered her head and said, Doctor, I still can't contact my sister. I've never experienced this situation. I can't feel my sister's existence at all. I'm a little scared. Your sister is fine. Gores said, Nelson told me that she just fell asleep. It's normal that you can't contact her. No, Tina said with a hint of eagerness. Usually, I can feel my sister's existence even when I'm asleep. Even when we're asleep, we're connected, but now the line between us seems to be cut off. Let be cut off, Dr. Gores said indifferently. As early as the moment I separated you, you were already independent of each other. If you think this connection is better, then I'll think that you actually don't want to be separated. I didn't mean that. Don't think too much. Dr. Gores said softly, Your sister is fine. Perhaps this kind of comfort was useful. Tina nodded obediently. I know. Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Gores suddenly said seriously, Let me ask you a question, Tina. Go ahead, Doctor. Dr. Gores asked quietly, Who do you think is better looking between me, Sneeve, and our current captain? Bursts of fierce roars sounded, surging from all directions. Nan Xiaonan even felt like she was in the middle of a raging wave. The pressure brought by the roar seemed to be invading her soul, causing her to break out in a cold sweat uncontrollably. He had wandered through the gaps between dimensions, explored countless secret places, and experienced the dangers of countless subworlds. In his impression, there were very few things that could make him so fearful just because of the environmental factor. The slate fragment in her hand even had some slight vibrations at this time. This kind of vibration became more and more intense after she came to this particularly dark place. After fooling Lisa for so many rounds, it's finally time to uncover your face. She looked at the slate in her hand and muttered to herself. At this time, her servant card was already in the forbidden area of the roaring forest. Nan Xiaonan's action points were enough to support her to finally walk into the depths of the forbidden area. As she went deeper and deeper, the roars that made her soul throb disappeared. But Nan Xiaonan obviously didn't feel relaxed. On the contrary, the pressure was even stronger. Every step she took felt like her legs were filled with lead. You are not a person of this world. A hoarse voice suddenly sounded in Nan Xiaonan's ears. Chapter 1793. Its full name was The Path of Trials for the Brave. Only the brave, and those who were loved by nature, could pass it. The purpose of the Road of Trials was to select the most suitable candidate to become the new village chief of the tribe. That is to say, only when the new village chief needs to be selected will the Road of Trials be held. On the way to the Road of Trials leading to the temple, Mayfair still had doubts about what Sneeve said about him passing through the Road of Trials, because the village chief was still very healthy now. Even when her parents were young, this village had already existed. That's you, Snakel said indifferently. This trial road has never had any restrictions. There isn't even a single guard at the entrance. When and who entered, don't tell me all of you are clear about it. Mayfair didn't refute this statement. What Sneeve said was true. There had never been a guard at the entrance of the Road of Trials. It was just that the elves in the tribe were quite compliant with the rules. They had never heard of anyone breaking the rules. Then why do you want to take this Road of Trials? Mayfair asked vigilantly. She had already regarded Sneeve as a guy who had sneaked into the elf tribe many years ago. Therefore, the fact that he had entered the tribe was not discovered by the people in the tribe. She herself didn't know about this matter. Of course not, because I'm bored. Mr. Sneeve didn't want to say more. After that, no matter how Mayfair asked, he still remained silent. The team unexpectedly didn't collapse under such a high-pressure atmosphere. They even finally arrived at the entrance of the Road of Trials peacefully. Dr. Gores felt that this seemed to be a special existence like a magnetic field. Although the atmosphere was so anxious, the existence of this magnetic field could always make the volcano that should erupt at any time in a delicate balance. You wanted to scold someone and find someone to fight, but you couldn't find the reason or the person to scold or fight. You had to hold it in quite a lot. This was probably the feeling. Although it was called a trial, it didn't look like a dangerous place from the outside. It was just an ordinary mountain road. However, on the other side of the hill, usually, when the elves of the elf tribe went to the temple to worship, they would take the mountain road facing the village. There are 3 guards in total. Sneeve looked at everyone and said, "It's a test of bravery, intelligence, and spirit respectively. The first guard is relatively easy to deal with. There shouldn't be any problems in terms of strength." Of course, there was no problem. The gardener, the doctor, and the maid all looked at Luo Chio. They had seen Boss Luo's power along the way. Even though he had never seen his combat skills, he had always settled the battle with a single sword strike. It was probably because those demons were too weak. If the opponent's strength was slightly higher, he would probably be able to see the combat skills of this temporary captain. "Let's go up," Boss Luo said indifferently. "It seems that the sun is about to set." With that, Boss Luo took the lead and stepped onto the mountain road, the trial road for the brave ones. Mayfair followed closely behind, not for any other reason, but because she subconsciously felt safer doing so, although she didn't know why. It was a very strange feeling. Dr. Gores and the other 2 followed behind easily. They probably fully acknowledged the strength of their temporary captain. "Speaking of which, I heard that you were a master at that time." Dr. Gores suddenly said, "So, the person who cleared the trial road was actually your servant, not you. Is there a difference?" Sneeve said indifferently. He would carefully discuss with me what he experienced in the chessboard. "Even if I haven't been to this place, I know everything clearly." Dr. Gores smiled. Even if you see it with your own eyes, it may be false. Have you ever thought that the servant in the chessboard can also deceive the master outside the chessboard? What's the benefit of this kind of deception to the servant itself? Sneeve sneered. Let the master lose the game and let himself be buried in the chessboard? Why don't you deceive Nelson? Guys, let's not talk about this. Have you noticed that we seem to be getting farther and farther away from them? Ms. Maid suddenly asked at this time. Gores and Sneeve looked forward at the same time. Since they entered the trial road, they had been following Boss Luo and Mayfair closely. At most, they were 5 or 6 steps away from them. But at this time, the distance between the two sides was at least 11 or 12 meters. Did they speed up? Dr. Gores couldn't help but frown, and then his face slightly changed. Because the distance between the two sides increased again. It increased by nearly twice. Then suddenly, a thick fog appeared in front of them. In the thick fog, Boss Luo and Mayfair directly turned into 2 light gray shadows, and finally disappeared in the blink of an eye. Even then, the thick fog spread again and directly surrounded the 3 of them. They couldn't even see what was close at hand. No, there's a problem with this road. Dr. Gores instantly reacted. Sneeve? I don't know. A trace of doubt flashed in Sneeve's eyes at this time. Gerald didn't mention the thick fog to me at that time. He went up along the trial road and soon met the first guard. Although it took some effort, he finally defeated it and continued to move forward. There will be no thick fog on this road. So you want to tell me that this trial road is keeping pace with the times and there are new changes after you passed it? Dr. Gores pulled out his dagger at this time and looked around, saying angrily, Master Sneeve, the times have changed. Something is approaching. Sneeve didn't bother to pay attention to him, but he also took out his weapon and was fully alert. Over there, Ms. Maid pointed at a direction at this time. In the thick fog, a huge black shadow that was 3 times their height was walking slowly at this time. As it walked, its heavy footsteps even made the ground tremble slightly. Suddenly, a strong wind came. A huge strip-shaped black shadow suddenly smashed toward them at this time. Bang! Mr. Luo, did you hear anything? Mayfair asked with a nervous face at this time. She didn't know when the thick fog appeared around them. Even when she looked at Luocchio, his face was a little hazy. In addition, Mayfair had already discovered that they were separated from Gores and the other 2. So they were now waiting in the same place, hoping that Gores and the other 2 could catch up with them. It was reasonable to say that they wouldn't get lost on this mountain road all the way up. But looking at this degree of thick fog, Mayfair was really uncertain. I heard it. Boss Luo smiled at this time. I heard your heartbeat. It's a little faster. Ah, me? Mayfair couldn't help but feel her heart suddenly jump. I'm just a little nervous. I think so too. Boss Luo opened his palm. At the center of his palm, there was a beautifully wrapped small object at this time. Mayfair didn't know what this thing was, but she had a very sensitive sense of smell. So she said subconsciously, What is this candy? I smell a very sweet smell. This is a milk candy. Luocchio gave it to Mayfair. It can help you. Mayfair took it subconsciously, opened the candy wrapper, and then put the pure white milk candy into her mouth. It's so sweet, but it really feels better. It's really amazing. Boss Luo said casually, I think we'd better keep moving forward. Maybe the fog will disperse a little in front of us. Or maybe they've already walked ahead of us. But because the fog is too thick, we didn't notice them walking in front of us. Okay. Mayfair nodded. At this time, the sweet taste melted in her mouth, bit by bit into her heart. It was a taste she had never tasted before. She suddenly couldn't bear to throw away the candy wrapper, so she carefully folded it and then stuffed it into her collar. But this action couldn't be hidden. Mayfair said casually, This candy wrapper is also very beautiful. The picture on it is too exquisite. I want to keep it as a souvenir. Then these are for you. Boss Luo smiled casually, turned his hand again. This time, it was a big bag of milk candy, White Rabbit creamy candies. All for me? Mayfair was shocked. This kind of candy must be very expensive. Even the candies offered to the gods and the tribe can't be better than this. This is very common where we come from. Boss Luo smiled and said, Anyone can buy it easily. It's not something expensive. Mayfair shook her head, but it seemed that she really couldn't bear to part with the sweet taste. So she reached out and took one out. I think this is enough. Well, why don't you take more, just one? Luaccio asked curiously. Mayfair held the candy in her hands in front of her chest, softly said, because it will become a kind of expectation. Because if there is only one left, I won't bear to eat it and will cherish it. But also because there is one more, this can let me know that when I miss this sweet taste, I still have a chance to relive it. My mother told me that only limited things are worthy of learning how to cherish. Boss Luo's eyes had a hint of a smile. But this kind of thing is really everywhere in our place. We can even produce an incalculable amount every day. Mayfair chuckled and said, even if that's the case, I only want this one. Besides, if I have a chance to leave the forest in the future and go to the outside world, I can easily obtain it according to what you said. Well, there seems to be one more reason to leave the village. She was an elf, one of those beautiful elves in the legends. Do you really want to leave the forest? Boss Luo asked in a low voice at this time. Almost without thinking, Mayfair nodded her head. The moment she nodded her head, her heart suddenly began to beat violently. She felt as though something was surging towards her from all directions, causing her to feel as though she was suffocating. Mayfair's face instantly turned pale. Her lips trembled as if her throat was being squeezed. But this feeling suddenly dissipated with Boss Luo's sigh like a receding tide. Mayfair relaxed at this time and directly fell to the ground with her legs weak. That was close. I almost couldn't hold it in. Boss Luo sighed softly again, thinking of Mayfair, and stretched out his hand. Are you okay? Just now? What happened just now? Mayfair turned around at this time. She didn't hear Boss Luo's first sentence clearly. She only heard the latter sentence. She shook her head and said, nothing. I just suddenly felt a little scared. She grabbed Luaccio's hand and stood up, then softly said a word of thanks. Why don't we rest here for a while? Luaccio let go of her and then suggested. Mayfair pinched her fingers lightly, then put them down, shook her head and said, I'm fine. Let's quickly move forward and see if we can walk out of the thick fog first. All right, there's something I've always wanted to ask you, but it's inconvenient with so many people around. What is it? Mayfair looked at Boss Luo's shoulder and asked curiously, why do you always have this elf with you? She's lost. Boss Luo said indifferently. She wants me to help her find the way back, but I haven't promised her. Mephistopheles opened his mouth, his face full of doubt. Haven't promised her? What the hell? You're not from this world. When this hoarse voice sounded in Nan Xiaonan's ears, this demon, virtuous girl of the subworld instantly exploded. Of course I'm not from this world. Nan Xiaonan snorted coldly. Where did this bastard come from? Let me tell you, if I wasn't unlucky enough to come to this damn place, I wouldn't have the fields I have now. Let me tell you, I grew up scared. Do you dare to fight with me in the void? I can blow you to death with a breath. The hoarse voice fell silent. Nan Xiaonan crossed her arms and snorted. I'm tired of walking. No matter what you are, I'm annoyed now and don't want to go forward. If you want to come out and stand in front of me, or I'll turn around and leave. The hoarse voice still remained silent. Nan Xiaonan didn't say anything and directly turned around and walked back the way she came. She even quickened her pace. Wait. That hoarse voice finally rang out again after Nan Xiaonan had taken a few dozen steps. I'm trapped here, and I can't move. But if you really want to leave, just leave. I won't keep you. Coward. Nan Xiaonan despised it in her heart and stopped as if she had won. She raised her chin and said, Tell me your name first. I'm not used to talking to people without names. Name? The voice slowly sounded, It's been too long. I can't remember my name. The one pressing me is a rock. You can call me Big Rock. Big Rock. Nan Xiaonan frowned. How did you get trapped here? Are you also a servant? Because you lost a brave game, so you got trapped in the chessboard? Chessboard? That hoarse voice. Big Stone suddenly laughed wildly. You actually call this a chessboard? It's really funny. Is it so funny? Nan Xiaonan snorted. Big Stone suddenly stopped laughing. Let me ask you, do you want to get this chessboard? Chapter 1794. Do you want to get this chessboard? Nan Xiaonan didn't even need to think before she came up with the answer. Yes. At present, she was not good at doing anything. She had not made any progress in deconstructing the rules of the subworld. She had great skills, but now she only had a few tricks. Even she despised herself. Therefore, she was really in need of some powerful tools or secret treasures to put up a front. Otherwise, it would be too shameful if her acquaintances knew about it. You want me to open your seal and let you go? She knew clearly what this guy called Big Stone was thinking. Her tone was more or less disdainful. The sealed one inside, don't you think your method of seduction is too simple? Simple things are good. Big Stone's voice sounded again. We are born simple. Eating, drinking, and sleeping are all instincts. Nan Xiaonan thought for a while and said, Tell me how to get the chessboard first. Then you can leave here. Big Stone's voice floated again. Actually, since I was sealed here, I have been prepared to never leave. If I can leave, it will be my fortune. If I can only stay here, it will be my fate. Nan Xiaonan picked her nails and said indifferently, If you want me to do something, you should at least give me some guarantee or even a deposit. Don't you know that? You said that you were prepared to never leave. Why did you put these slate fragments outside to lead people to find this place? Although I don't know what method you use to place the tablet fragments outside, but thinking about it, it's your misfortune that you can't leave, and it's your fate that you can only stay here. Isn't that right? What a sharp-tongued girl. I could do anything. Forget it. Big Stone's voice was not angry. Instead, there was a hint of laughter in it. Let me ask you, do you know the nature of this place? Nan Xiaonan tucked her hair behind her ear and thought for a while, saying, Normally, when I entered this chessboard, I would think that this world is a fantasy space created by the chessboard. Maybe those who entered this place before all thought it through. In fact, this is probably a fragment world of a certain world. Oh, you are quite knowledgeable. Big Stone's voice slowed down. After a while, he said, It seems that you're not from this world. You're not even from the world outside the chessboard. Nan Xiaonan narrowed her eyes. You really know about the void. Are you a void explorer who was lost here? Nan Xiaonan's idea was not baseless. She herself was the best proof. You see, because she did not do divination when she went out, she encountered a strong spatial fluctuation when she was walking and then got sucked into this subworld. If such an unlucky thing could happen, what else could not happen? I don't want to talk about what happened before I was sealed, but I can tell you that I was not sealed here to explore, Big Stone said slowly. Big Stone said slowly, The world you are in now is actually a fragment that was peeled off from a world of the demonic laws. It was then put into this chessboard and finally evolved into what you see now. Nan Xiaonan listened attentively, and her brain quickly analyzed the situation. However, the guy who has it now can only barely use a small part of its functions, Big Stone said with a hint of disdain. Nan Xiaonan could not help but frown. She said, No, logically speaking, the chessboard has been in the hands of the current owner for a long time. His name is Wally. So, normally, if you want to leave here, you should have contacted him long ago, right? Wally? I never cared about this guy's name. Big Stone said indifferently. Because from the moment he got the chessboard, I knew clearly that no matter how hard he tried, he could not touch the real core of the chessboard. His bloodline is not right, and he can't even meet the minimum requirements. Nan Xiaonan was surprised. You mean my bloodline is right? The slate in your hand is the best proof. Big Stone hummed softly. Although there's almost nothing shallow about it. No matter what, he's still a descendant of her. You may be the most suitable candidate, but compared to this, what's his name again? Forget it, it doesn't matter. Anyway, compared to him, you're naturally thousands of times more suitable. Nan Xiaonan was speechless. Whose descendant could she be? Her original subworld had been broken long ago, and no trace of it was left. As the creature who finally broke through the shackles of her original world, she had cut off all the connections and achieved immortality. As for whose descendant she was, it was probably the body she was in now. In fact, she had already merged with the former Nan Xiaonan, and there was no distinction between them. But she suddenly shook her head. After saying so much, you still haven't got to the point. I don't care about the background, but I haven't seen any benefits from you until now. That's the truth. Don't worry. Big Stone laughed. Haven't you already gotten the benefits? I got it. Nan Xiaonan opened her mouth and then raised the slate fragment in her hand in astonishment. You mean this slate fragment? Haven't you found that with this slate fragment, you can move freely here and resist the restrictions to a limited extent? What is this slate? Nan Xiaonan asked seriously. You can think of it as the spirit of the chessboard. Its will. Big Stone said slowly. As you can see, it has been broken, so it can't coordinate with the chessboard. What you need to do now is to collect the other fragments and make it whole again. Nan Xiaonan said indifferently. This place is neither big nor small. How do you want me to find it? I'll teach you the way to sense them. Big Stone said in a deep voice. Listen carefully, I'll only say it once. Nan Xiaonan said, in fact, I've always wanted to complain about this kind of I'll only say it once. What if I can't remember it or remember it wrongly? Don't you think you're courting death? Will you die if you say it one more time? Listen carefully. Big Stone was silent for a while, and then continued, I'll say it until you remember it. Go ahead. Nan Xiaonan sat down and picked her ears. Actually, I have a good memory. Once again, they felt the benefits of hugging someone powerful, and they missed it so much. In the thick fog of the trial road, Dr. Gores glanced at his left arm. How'd he lose it? His arm was completely hanging down, and he was glad that his arm was not broken directly. But at this time, time did not allow him to connect the arm bones. The first guard on the road of trial was a bull-headed monster that was almost 6 meters tall and was holding a huge wooden club. Dr. Girth had tried to cut the skin of this bull-headed monster. With his current weapons and strength, it was difficult for him to cut open the skin of this bull-headed monster. On the other hand, if the Minotaur's wooden club came into contact with him, it would be enough to shatter him into pieces. Snakel, did your servant really break through this trial path that year, and he wasn't the one who was defeated? Gerald's swordsmanship is very good, Mr. Sneeve said coldly. He said that although the battle was quite fierce, it was definitely not one-sided. I can only say that you can't do it. If you can do it, why don't you do it? Dr. Gores stared at Sneeve, who was more embarrassed than him. Is this a monster that can be defeated by simple swordsmanship? You too. Now is not the time to quarrel. Tina had no choice but to stop the unpleasantness between the two of them. She quickly asked, Mr. Snakel, since your servant really defeated this guard back then, did he mention how he did it? Or did he mention the weakness of this Minotaur guard? He didn't say in detail. Mr. Snaff quickly recalled. But he did mention that in the end, he pierced the Minotaur guard's heart from behind with his sword. Behind? Dr. Gores frowned and said, the muscles and skin of the back should be thicker, right? But at this time, Miss Maid suddenly jumped up. Her profession's advantage was that she was quite agile. Her attack power was really not good, but her speed was amazing. She nimbly climbed on the bull-headed monster's body, and then moved to the back of the bull-headed monster. She grabbed the hair of the bull-headed monster's neck with one hand, and her whole body was attached to the bull-headed monster's back. This suddenly angered the bull-headed monster with thick flesh and divine power, and the huge wooden stick in its hand even made a strong whirlwind. It seems that there is an old wound here. At this time, Tina screamed, and at the same time, she directly inserted the sharp blade in her hand into the bull-headed monster's back. In an instant, the bull-headed monster screamed miserably. It instantly became violent, crazily attacking everything around it, and even threw Tina out. Seeing this, Dr. Gores gritted his teeth and rushed to the bull-headed monster. His eyes suddenly became sharp and directly penetrated the whirlwind of the bull-headed monster's wooden stick and went to its back. Then he jumped up and kicked the hilt of the sharp blade that was inserted into the bull-headed monster's back. The sharp blade instantly penetrated deeper into the bull-headed monster's back. At this time, the bull-headed monster's body stiffened and then fell forward. It groaned in pain and finally stopped moving after a while. Tina climbed up from the ground at this time and walked to Dr. Gores' side, but she saw that the doctor was busy reconnecting her left arm. His face didn't change, and only a cracking sound was heard. The displaced bone seemed to have been corrected. That was close. Dr. Gore swung his arm at this time. Without this old wound, I guess we can only run away. Sneeve, this time I really want to thank your servant. But at this moment, Mr. Snaff had come to the side of the Minotaur guard, holding the deadly blade firmly, not saying a word. Sneeve, Dr. Gores frowned, and immediately thought of something. Wait, this old wound was caused by your servant. Is this the same bull-headed monster? Tina was stunned. Is there a problem? Maybe Mr. Sneeve's servant just pierced the bull-headed monster, but didn't really die, but was seriously injured and in a coma? Not this. Dr. Gores frowned and said, Did you forget what Mayfair said before? She said that every day is the same. Every day is repeated, and when she wakes up, she will return to her original appearance. If this is the case, this bull-headed monster will also return to its original state. There shouldn't be this old wound on its back. You mean? Tina opened her mouth. That elf is lying? There is another possibility. Mr. Sneeve said calmly at this time, Mayfair didn't lie. The wound on the bull-headed monster's back is a wound that will still exist even if it returns to its original state. It was caused earlier. Perhaps it was caused by someone who challenged the road of trial earlier. My servant, Gerald, also found this old wound and pierced it with his sword. And this possibility is even more credible. Have you forgotten the hint of the mission given by Chessboard? Find out the reason why Mayfair repeats every day. Dr. Gore shook his head. I also hope so. He suddenly felt that his mouth was dry, and he subconsciously looked around, but it was difficult to distinguish the surrounding white. But he could still feel the way up. Anyway, we passed the first level. The doctor thought for a moment and said, We are now separated from the temporary captain. Looking at the thick fog, it is probably unrealistic to meet him. We can only go down this path. If it goes well, maybe we can meet him in the second level. To be honest, the next two levels are also battles, right? Sneeve? The second level doesn't need to fight. Sneeve shook his head and said, It is a maze, a place to test wisdom. A maze? Dr. Gores nodded. It's just a maze. I have a good memory. The little elf on Boss Luo's shoulder later flew to Mephistopheles' shoulder, probably because Mephistopheles, as an elf, had a scent that the little elf liked. From time to time, Mayfair would use her fingers to tease the little elf, a sweet smile on her lips. Speaking of which, we should have walked for a long time already. Mayfair was confused. I heard from elders in the village that as long as we enter the trial road, we will soon meet the first guard. But why haven't we met it yet? Maybe, Boss Luo thought seriously, it has something to do and left. Or it is resting. Puff. The elf lady couldn't help but laugh out loud, which made her look more beautiful. She said with a smile, If so, I hope it will come back later or rest more. It would be best if we could finish the trial road smoothly. The fog here seems to be thinner. Wow, the road ahead can be seen more clearly. The two of them quickened their pace and soon walked out of the area, shrouded in fog. Then, Mayfair froze in place and even covered her mouth. Temple. Mayfair pointed to the front in disbelief. How do we get to the temple? Where's the trial? This was indeed the temple. The elf tribe wouldn't mistake this place, but this was behind the temple, which was the end of the trial road. Did she really successfully complete the entire trial? I was just saying it casually. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. As usual. Don't wait. Equals colon. Chapter 1795. There was no doubt that this was the Temple of Light. Mayfair looked at the road behind her subconsciously. Behind her was the trial road. But at this moment, she could no longer see the thick fog that had obstructed them. She felt that she had not walked for a long time. In her impression, the time spent on the trial road seemed to be about the same as the time spent on the normal road up the mountain to enter the Temple of Light to worship. But how could this be? This was really the trial road. In the village, the villagers were forbidden to come in contact with it. Other than the forbidden area outside, it was the most dangerous place. Just as Mayfair was distracted, she felt her arm was suddenly pulled by someone. Then, her body moved to the side. It was Luaccio. Don't talk. Someone is coming. Boss Luo pulled Mayfair to the side and hid. Then he looked outside. Behind a stone pillar, there were many patterns carved on the pillar. It looked more like a totem pillar. At this moment, Mephistopheles was shocked and also stuck his head out. He saw that there were indeed two figures not far away. At this moment, they were walking around the outer walls of the temple. They are the temple's guards, especially the one on the left. His name is Malik. He is very powerful and is the captain of the temple's guards. Fortunately, they did not discover us. Otherwise, we would be in trouble. Mephistopheles patted his chest lightly and heaved a sigh of relief. It looks like they are just patrolling. Boss Luo took a few more glances and smiled. Let's wait for them to leave before we find a way in. They were too close. Mayfair was a little nervous. In her memory, she had never been so close to a vision. But at this moment, the captain of the Temple of Light suddenly pointed at the place where Boss Luo and Mayfair were hiding. He said in a deep voice, "Who is hiding there?" Mayfair was shocked. She instinctively wanted to move back. But at this moment, Boss Luo suddenly pressed on her shoulder and shook his head. Mayfair was shocked. Boss Luo gestured for her to keep quiet, indicating for her to continue watching. At this time, the guard drew his weapon and tentatively walked toward the stone pillar. But before he could take 2 steps, the guard captain behind him suddenly launched a sneak attack. The sharp blade easily pierced through the player's body from behind. "Captain Malik, you..." The team member did not manage to struggle much. His mouth was even covered by the captain of the guards, Malik. In the end, after a few struggles, his body went limp and fell to the ground. Seeing this scene, Mayfair desperately covered his mouth with both hands, afraid that he would make a sound out of fear. It was just that she was really scared, and her body couldn't help but tremble. But in the end, she didn't move, and even the sound of her breathing was forcibly stopped. Soon, after killing the team member with a sneak attack, the captain of the guards, Malik, quickly looked around. Then he directly carried the body of the team member and quickly walked in through the back door of the temple. Captain Malik. She was really scared and couldn't speak clearly. She tightly grasped the clothes on Boss Luo's arm, and her beautiful face was as white as paper. I saw it too. Boss Luo looked at Mayfair, deep breaths 3 times. Mayfair subconsciously took deep breaths. It didn't take 3 breaths, but only 2 breaths, and her emotions were slightly stabilized. Why did Captain Malik kill him? Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "Why did you escape from the tribe?" Mayfair said without thinking, "To avoid being a sacrifice. Because the current god is fake, and it is actually a monster that eats people." Could it be? Do you still want to go in? Mayfair's expression changed slightly. She gritted her teeth and said in a deep voice, "I want to go in. If Captain Malik is really doing this for the monster in the temple, I have to expose him. Otherwise, in the village, more people will be harmed. I can't just watch. Evidence. I need evidence to expose them. Even if the people in the village want to use you as a sacrifice." Mayfair shook her head and said, "Of course I hate those who insist on using me as a sacrifice. But there are other people and the children in the village. They don't know anything. Do you want me to hate them too? Do you want me to hate some people, but not care about the people I like? I can't do it. But you did want to escape, and you have been escaping all this time." Boss Luo said indifferently, "We found you in the forest. You were on the way to escape, and you were injured." Mayfair smiled bitterly and said, "I admit that I am weak. But just now, when I saw Captain Malik kill people, I actually wanted to save him. But because I was scared, I didn't even dare to move." She hugged her body tightly. "I saw Captain Malik take out his weapon. If I made a little movement or made a sound to alarm them, maybe Captain Malik wouldn't have succeeded. I told myself that, but I couldn't do it. The one who killed people was Captain Malik, but I, who didn't save him, was also an accomplice. You have to understand that if you made a warning, you'll also be in danger." Boss Luo said slowly, "You are not an accomplice. You're just protecting yourself. When people are in danger, they will protect themselves. There is nothing to be ashamed of." Mayfair took a deep breath and said, "But it is not something to be proud of. I think I really shouldn't run away anymore. Thank you for sending me here. I will walk the rest of the way by myself." There is no need to involve you and your friends in this danger. In that case, let's go in. Boss Luo stood up and extended his hand to Mayfair. But you... Mayfair moved her lips and asked softly, "Why are you helping me? We are now adventurers." Boss Luo smiled and said, "Since we are adventurers, we naturally have to take risks. Don't look at me like this. I should be quite powerful." She reached out her hand subconsciously and felt that it was a hand that brought her warmth and peace of mind. But just as Mephistopheles was about to touch him, she suddenly retracted her hand. Instead, she pressed down on her knees and slowly stood up. She took deep breaths again and again until her emotions were completely stabilized. Then, she said seriously, "Okay, let's go in together." Although he was surprised, Luocio did not say anything. He turned to look at the back door of the temple. "If we go in from the back door, we might be discovered. Is there any other entrance?" But at that moment, Mayfair suddenly pushed out her palms. She seemed to be chanting something. Instantly, a soft green light covered Boss Luo's body. He quickly fell to the ground. Mayfair quickly went forward and supported Luocio. Then, she gently placed him behind a pillar. "Thank you, but this is something I have to face. You wait here for your friends." She looked at the sleeping face in front of her and subconsciously reached out to touch it. However, his fingertips paused for a moment. Separated by a thin layer of air, Mephistopheles slowly took a deep breath and whispered, "Even if I encounter any danger, when I wake up, it will still be today. I will forget." She sighed and then suddenly stood up. With a wave of her hand, the weeds began to grow wildly and covered Boss Luo's body. After that, Mayfair unsheathed the sword at her waist. In a flash, she was already at the back door of the temple. She gently pushed open the door and leaned in. At that moment, behind the totem pillar, the lush weeds were slowly degenerating to their original state. Boss Luo, who was sleeping, had opened his eyes. This was a maze, a 100% maze. The most common type of maze in the game Hero versus the Evil Dragon. The dim passageway, the gloomy stone walls and floor, the seemingly endless forks in the road, and then there was the treasure chest monster. Dr. Girls looked at the treasure chest that was biting his palm with all his might and looked at Mr. Snakel expressionlessly. "You said that the second level doesn't need to fight, it's just a maze." Before this, they had encountered several waves of maze monsters. The battle was not very fierce, and the danger level of the monsters was completely within the range they could bear. However, when they cleared the Minotaur guard, they consumed too much physical strength, so the battle was not fierce, but fatigue had spread. At this moment, Mr. Snaff probably felt a little embarrassed, so he silently pushed away the treasure chest beast that was biting Dr. Gillis' hand. Then he chopped down with his sword and killed it. Then he threw a bottle of recovery potion to Dr. Gores. "Drink it when your life is almost gone. Don't waste it." TSK. Dr. Gores disdainfully slapped the recovery potion back. He took out a bottle, twisted it open, and drank it. He had a lot of recovery potions. Not only him, but Tina and Sneeve also had some good ones. These were the spoils of war that they picked up after a lost temporary captain. Dr. Gores just felt that Sneeve's behavior of using flowers to worship Buddha was too shameless. But then again, they had gone through the first level of the guards, and now they had entered the second level of the maze. However, they did not encounter the lost temporary captain along the way. This was something that everyone had no choice but to do. The temporary captain was actually still at the back. Could it be that they have retreated and returned to the starting point to wait for us? Dr. Gores had to make such a guess, and it was easy for the other two to agree with him. However, they had already gone deep into the second level of the maze. It was unrealistic to just leave like this. "Doctor, have you thought of a way to leave this maze?" Miss Maid seemed to have a strong confidence in Dr. Gores. She was not worried at all at this time and asked quite easily. Dr. Gores snorted twice and said indifferently, "Almost. After a few more passages, we should be able to completely find the pattern of this maze. Speaking of which, although this chessboard world is incredible, the level of civilization in this world is not high. The construction level of this maze is naturally not high. Damn it, Why does this path seem to have been walked before? Why does every path look the same? That's good. Tina nodded and did not speak. Let's continue, Sneeve. Dr. Gores thought at this time and suddenly said, since you have nothing to contribute, just carve a mark on the wall so that I can find the pattern. Mr. Sneeve sneered directly at this time. Tina had to whisper to Dr. Gores quietly, Doctor, he started to carve a mark on the wall not long after he came in. When did this happen? Why didn't I notice it? Dr. Gores could not help but feel surprised. Miss Maid said, Doctor, you were leading the way in front, so you didn't notice it. But I noticed that we didn't encounter the mark left by Sneeve, which proves that we didn't go in circles. Doctor, you're so good. Child's play. Dr. Gores shrugged. I stopped playing this maze game before I took the first sip of blood. Oh, so this path has not been walked before. Fortunately, it's fine. The passage was very quiet, so the conversation between the two naturally fell into Sneeve's ears. He simply shook his head and walked to the corner, using his weapon to carve a mark on the wall. But just as he was about to leave, Mr. Sneeve's face suddenly changed slightly. He suddenly touched the wall and rubbed his palm on the wall. What are you doing? Dr. Gores walked over in confusion, but he saw Sneeve rubbing the wall harder and harder. Not long after, in the place where Sneeve rubbed, there was a mark on the wall that had been there for some years. This was obviously not the mark that Mr. Sneeve had just carved. It should be the mark made by the testes who entered the maze before. Miss Maid thought for a while. No, Mr. Sneeve was shocked at this time. This is the mark made by Gerald. What did you say? Dr. Gores was startled. The mark made by your servant. Are you sure? I won't be wrong. Mr. Sneeve said excitedly. Only Gerald can use this symbol. He said that this is the ancient language of his people, the language of Asgard. This symbol should mean direction. The ancient language. Dr. Gores frowned at this time. So the wound on the back of the bull-headed guard in the first level was also left by your former servant. That is to say, Mayfair is lying. The three of them said in unison. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. 7084ths. Chapter 1796. Castle Banquet Hall. It was still quiet here. Except for the occasional conversation, everyone's attention was focused on the chessboard, or rather, the position and distance of the serving cards on the chessboard. Right? There was also the sound of the dice hitting the chessboard when he threw the action dice. It was as if it had some kind of magical power that made him want to continue throwing it. It made people hope that they would be able to keep throwing and not have to wait for the next round to come. The bell in the castle suddenly rang, disturbing the tranquility. Mr. Varley smiled. I didn't expect time to pass so fast. It's already 12 o'clock. Midnight. Butler Lisa seemed to be quite sensitive to time. After Mr. Varley said the time, he directly looked at Mr. Nelson and said, Nelson, please prepare some food. It's time for lunch. I think so too. Mr. Nelson nodded without hesitation. How to put it? Although he was still in the game, he had already given the right to act to Miss Maid, who was the master captain. Therefore, his temporary absence had no effect on the following game. At most, he couldn't let Dr. Gores, as his servant, know what happened in the banquet hall. Please wait a moment. I'll serve you delicious food soon. Nelson looked at the crowd and said politely. Miss Gonglina looked at the prizes of the winner of the game, the crops in Mr. Varley's private farm, and smiled. I didn't expect this game to last so long. This is really unexpected. If it's interesting enough, I can keep playing. Mr. Varley smiled faintly. Keep having fun and add color to the dull life. Miss Gonglina responded with an elegant smile, but she was puzzled. A long time had passed since she entered the castle to attend a banquet. In other words, her coachman had been in action for a long time. Although Varley's castle was luxurious and spacious, a few hours was enough for an ordinary person to walk a few laps around the castle. However, she didn't receive any news until now. At this moment, Chef Nelson slowly pushed the cart with the appetizer, Blood Fountain, out of the banquet hall. He pushed open the side door of the banquet hall. Just as he was about to leave, there was a sudden barking sound in the banquet hall. It was the barking of Black Hound and Black Dragon. It was fast, loud, and even ear-piercing. Miss Gonglina frowned slightly. She was a person who liked peace and quiet. Such an ear-piercing sound made her instinctively resist. A trace of murderous intent even flashed through the eyes of the eldest daughter of the Tsimisai family. "Please wait a moment, Mr. Nelson." He suddenly called out to the chef who was about to leave. "What's the matter?" Miss Maid smiled and said, "If possible, can you prepare some food for it? After all, it's Mr. Sneeve's pet. Mr. Sneeve is working hard for us in the chessboard. I think we should take care of it." Chef Nelson paused for a moment and then nodded. "Of course." The side door of the banquet hall slowly closed, and Black Dragon and Black Hound gradually fell silent. However, their gazes were fixed on the side door that Chef Narson had just left through. The game continued. It was Mr. Wally's turn. A rather ideal number appeared on the die. Mr. Wally smiled and suddenly opened a function card in the preparation area. "I'm going to activate this jump card." He flipped the card and threw it to the center of the chessboard. "This is a card that multiplies my action points by 6. In other words, the distance I can move this time is 30 squares. While Mr. Varley spoke, Cality's servant card directly landed in the roaring forest at the speed of a grid jump. "Wally, it seems that you really can't forget this forest," Miss Gong Lina said with a fake smile. "Aren't you afraid that the punishment wheel will appear again? There are many ways to play this game." Mr. Wally didn't care about his sister's sarcasm and said calmly, "As long as you know what kind of opponent you are facing, you can think of a way to deal with it. Miss Lost Traveler, you don't mind, right? This initiative of mine." "Of course not." Miss Maid smiled and said, "The world is originally driven by people with ambition. If you lose this ambition, perhaps the world will still be in a primitive state. Mr. Varley, you might as well think about it. When our servants meet again, see if there is still a possibility of an alliance. If so," Mr. Wally smiled faintly, "it's too unfair for my sister, Gong Lina." Miss Gong Lina said indifferently, "It's okay. You see, Mr. Lisa is still single." "Lisa, do you want to team up with me?" "Miss, you must be joking." Mr. Butler said indifferently, "I'm afraid it's too late." "That's true." Miss Gong Lina smiled and said, "After all, there is such a distance. I think I'd better be alone. It's actually quite interesting to wander around the battlefield and pick up small monsters." "Then, let's start the life reduction roll." Mr. Wally pushed the die in front of Miss Gong Lina at this time. "It's still starting from you, my sister." She didn't care and rolled the dice casually. At the current stage of the development of the chessboard game, it was very difficult to kill a servant by reducing their life points. After all, it was very difficult to kill a servant like what Mr. Wally did. Beep, 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 beep. The die hit the chessboard and made this kind of sound again. Mayfair was lying. The three-man team in the depths of the labyrinth of the second stage of the trial fell silent after coming to this conclusion almost at the same time. "Sneeve, are you the only person who touched this game plot twice?" Dr. Gores suddenly said. I said. Mr. Sneeve shook his head and said, "At that time, I entered the elf tribe through Mayfair. But at that time, I sent her directly to the village. From beginning to end, she didn't wake up. Although it's Mayfair, obviously, my experience before and after is different. Why did she lie? Is the plot necessary?" Dr. Gores frowned, but I saw her tone when she spoke. It didn't seem like she was talking. If she can deceive us, then this elf lady's acting is extraordinary. In fact, if she is really lying, she has successfully deceived everyone. The maid thought for a while and said, "This time, if Mr. Sneeve didn't find the exclusive mark left by his previous servant, we wouldn't have discovered this." Silence again. For a moment, Dr. Gores shook his head and said, "Now it's just a waste of time to think about this problem. Sneeve, since your servant passed through this trial, does it mean that if we follow these previous marks, we may succeed in passing this maze?" "The chance is not small." Mr. Sneeve thought for a while. "This is indeed the mark left by Gerald." "Well, then it's decided. Follow the mark left by Gerald." Dr. Gores reorganized at this time. He loosened his neck and said, "I suddenly have a very strong feeling. Perhaps the elf lady we met is now at the end of the trial, waiting for us." "Why?" The maid couldn't help but ask in confusion. Dr. Gerald casually said, "Isn't it usually like this? After the pitiful female character's true colors are discovered, the adventuring protagonists will see her at the end of the checkpoint, and then some indescribable things will happen. It seemed to be reasonable. Mr. Sneeve shook his head. He reached out his hand to touch the old marks left on the wall and muttered to himself, "What else did you leave behind? Except these marks, except for the wounds on a Minotaur guard. Even now, even after so many years, am I still under your protection? Gerald? Well, the method, you have a good understanding. You can memorize this method so quickly, and you can even use it." In the forbidden area of the roaring forest, Nan Shaunen listened to Big Rock's voice. She didn't know where it came from, but she was very relaxed. How bad could a void immortal's understanding be? How bad could it be? Moreover, according to the so-called visualization method taught by Big Rock, the process of sensing the slate fragments in her hand was surprisingly smooth, without any hindrance. In the process of visualization, she could even vaguely sense a very faint sense of closeness from the fragment of the slate. This was probably what Big Stone meant when he said Nan Xiaonan's body was the descendant of some kind of bloodline. But according to Nan Xiaonan's knowledge, even if she was the descendant of some bloodline, it was probably many generations away, to the extent that she couldn't trace the origin. There is a fragment nearby. Nan Xiaonan thought for a while and said, "Just now, when I was learning how to visualize, I vaguely felt a similar wave coming from the other side. You're quite lucky to be able to let me sense a new fragment so quickly. That fragment has been here for a long time," Big Rock said indifferently. "Whether you can learn the visualization method quickly or not, I plan to tell you and let you collect the fragments here first." Maybe it was the counterattack of her previous ridicule, the old demon of the academia in its child world. Lady shrugged and suddenly laughed. "I've learned the visualization method. Aren't you afraid that I won't come back here after I find the other fragments and completely activate the core of the chessboard?" "You'll come back." Big Rock didn't show any emotion. Nan Xiaonan was stunned, but at this moment, she once again felt the wave of another fragment. It was quite strong, as if it was right in front of her. It directly told her that the location of this fragment was where the Big Rock was. However, this wave of fluctuation soon disappeared, as if it had been blocked. Nan Xiaonan was clever, and at this moment she sneered, "I see. No matter how long I find it, I'll definitely come back for the last fragment." "Go," Big Rock said indifferently. "I don't like to owe others. If you can really find the other fragments and come back here, I'll give you a chance." Nan Xiaonan tossed the fragment of the slate in her hand, and then smiled. "I always think that opportunities are not given by others, but fought for by oneself. Even if, see you later, Mr. Big Rock." This somewhat slender figure slowly disappeared into the forbidden area. In the depths of the forbidden area, a huge round rock suddenly shook a few times. Then it became calm again. There was no more terrifying roar coming from the forbidden land, but there was a slight sigh. "Even if I can get out, such a long time has passed the war. I'm afraid it's already over." Mayfair was moving forward slowly. In fact, every elf was good at moving forward. They live in the forest and learned how to hunt since they were young. They learned how to hide their breath so that they could get close to their prey more easily. They were also very sensitive to smells. The smell of blood on the clansmen killed by Captain Malik was now the best guiding light for Mayfair. She had been to the temple many times. She followed the elders of the village and entered the temple to worship at a fixed time every year, so she was familiar with the structure of the temple. Mayfair soon caught up with Captain Malik. At this moment, he was still carrying the dead clansman on his body. Mayfair didn't dare to get too close. She knew that Captain Malik was the bravest among the younger generation in the village, and he was even a popular candidate for the next village chief, until Captain Malik finally stopped in front of a huge and heavy door. This was the inner sanctum of the temple, the place where the gods lived. Mephistopheles held his breath as he watched Captain Malik gently push open the door. He then carried the corpses of his clansmen and lowered his head as he walked into the inner sanctum. The door was not completely closed. There was a trace of light coming out from the gap of the door. At this time, Murphy's footsteps were lighter, and she slowly approached the gap of the door. She began to hear some slight sounds. It seemed to have a trace of anger. "Malik, How many times have I told you I need fresh food? He's already dead. My lord, it's still hot. I just killed it. It's very fresh while it's still hot. Trash. Mayfair's expression changed slightly at this time, and in a flash, she climbed to the ceiling above the door, only to see a figure directly break out of the door at this time, and then directly hit the wall. It was none other than Captain Malik. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. As usual. Chapter 1797. Captain Malik spat out a mouthful of blood with a panicked expression. This was obviously not the bravest elf in the village that Mayfair once knew. Therefore, Mayfair was also shocked. But at this time, Captain Malik, who was on the ground, naturally saw Mayfair, who was supporting her body and hiding above. They directly looked at each other. Mayfair's face turned pale, and she almost fell down. But Captain Malik at this time looked at the inner temple through the door in a panic and said with a trembling voice, "Tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow there will be offerings sent to the temple." Wait. I'm hungry. I'm really hungry. Okay. I'll immediately find something fresher. Alive, it must be alive. Remember, don't let me down again, otherwise you know the consequences. Bang! The door was directly closed at this moment. Captain Malik sighed and directly fell to the ground as if she had lost all her strength. Mayfair at this time did not dare to move for a moment. Captain Malik had clearly seen her, but why did he at this time? Captain Malik raised her head again and stared at Mayfair's eyes. She was even more scared. But at this moment, Captain Malik actually made a gesture of silence. Mayfair could not help but be startled. It was still the temple, but it was slightly away from the inner temple. This was the place where the village used to baptize newborns. If there was nothing important, it was basically not used. It could be considered a relatively remote place. Mayfair at this time looked at the silent Captain Malik with vigilance. This was the place he led her to. The two sides kept a distance of arm's length. Mayfair even put her hand on the place where the weapon was placed and never let go. Okay, let's go from here. Captain Malik, who had been silent for a while, suddenly said, "The back of the temple of baptism leads directly to the back door of the temple. If you leave from there, it will be dark soon. Take advantage of the guards outside to find an opportunity to leave the mountain. For you, this shouldn't be difficult. After all, you are his daughter. He was once the fastest runner in the village. I know that you are actually very fast as well. You let me go?" Mayfair looked at Captain Malik in disbelief. She kept recalling the things about Captain Malik. This Malik was 40 to 50 years older than her and was still a young elf. She heard that he was relatively ordinary in the past, but after he became an adult, he showed considerable courage and was recognized as the bravest guy in the younger generation in the tribe. Finally, he directly passed the selection and became the captain of the temple guards. Captain Malik was kind to everyone and was very good to everyone. Even when she was finally chosen to be a sacrifice to serve the gods, she heard that Captain Malik had privately opposed it. Before today, Mayfair had even been secretly grateful to Captain Malik of the Guardian Squad. However, this gratitude had long since vanished in a thin air after seeing Captain Malik personally kill her clansmen. She was even incomparably fearful of this person who hid his terrifying face. However, in front of the inner temple gate, Captain Malik did not directly catch her. Instead, he still wanted to let her go, which made Mayfair a little confused. Captain Malik, could it be that he was not an accomplice of the monster disguised as a god in the inner temple? However, he had clearly killed the members of his own guards with his own hands and brought their corpses into the inner palace, wanting to feed that terrifying monster. I heard that earlier today, you secretly escaped. Captain Malik frowned and said, "Since you have already escaped, why did you come back?" "I am back. Isn't that what you want?" Mayfair sneered at this time and said, "Otherwise, where would you go to find a living sacrifice and send it to the gods, to the monster? A living one, right? How much did you see?" Captain Malik's face changed and looked at Mayfair with a trace of murderous intent. She was already prepared at this time. She directly took out her weapon and waited. "I saw it all. Sneak attack from behind to kill our people and bring the bodies of our people into the inner temple along the way. I saw it all, and I saw it very clearly. Malik, I will definitely tell this to the whole village. Even a monster pretending to be a god. You shouldn't have come back. Captain Malik sighed. You clearly could have escaped. Why didn't you escape? You have no parents, and there is nothing here for you to care about. Leaving the tribe, leaving the forest, the outside world is not good for you. Is it not good for you? I once thought about it. Mayfair said in a deep voice, but if I leave, more of our people will be killed and eaten by you, by the monster in the temple. I can't just leave it alone. There is no other way. Captain Malik shook his head. With a clang, he took out a sword that was longer and sharper than the short sword in Mayfair's hand. I don't want to let others know about this, so you should know what I'm going to do next. Are you going to surrender directly, or do you want me to really do it? Mayfair had already given her answer with her actions. She flashed and appeared behind Captain Malik like a ghost. However, Captain Malik seemed to have expected it. He casually inserted the sword in his hand behind his back and directly blocked Mayfair's attack. After her attack failed, she did not pull away. Instead, she began a storm of powerful attacks. However, the sword in Captain Malik's hand transformed into a screen of light and easily blocked it. Even in the face of Mayfair's concentrated attacks, he did not even move half a step. Like a bolt of lightning striking the ground in the darkness, Captain Malik swept out with his sword just as Mephistopheles was about to be exhausted from her powerful attacks. The immense power behind the strike sent Mephistopheles flying. Even her weapon was knocked away. Mayfair fell to the ground. She could not help but taste blood in her throat. She hurriedly wanted to get up, but at this moment, Captain Malik's sword was already pointed directly at her throat. You are very fast, but your strength is too weak, and your technique is even worse. Captain Malik said indifferently, From the moment I told you to leave, you already shut down and did not say anything. Just leave directly. Zhengji obviously will not let your path be any easier. If you want to kill me, then kill me. Mayfair gritted her teeth. However, if you want to bring me in front of that monster alive, I would rather commit suicide here. As she said this, Mayfair actually suddenly slammed into Captain Malik's arms. At her waist, there was actually a palm-sized knife hidden. However, Captain Malik effortlessly swatted Mephistopheles away with the flat of his sword. At this time, Mephistopheles directly stabbed his own throat with the small knife in his hand. Captain Malik's eyes flashed. He was even faster than her. In an instant, he flashed in front of Mayfair and directly knocked her unconscious with the hilt of his sword. Thump! The elf lady instantly collapsed on the ground and lost consciousness. Such a strong personality, really not like an elf at all. Captain Malik shook his head, but directly carried Mayfair and walked out of the baptism hall. At this moment, the sunlight was about to disappear, and the sky had completely darkened. The guards on the temple on the hill began to light up the surrounding lights. She woke up on a stone bed. The moment she woke up, Mayfair instinctively wanted to escape, but very quickly, she was directly pulled back by something. Her legs, at this moment, her legs were already shackled and connected to the iron chain. The iron chain was nailed to the stone bed. She simply could not break free. Mayfair looked around in horror and finally saw Captain Malik in the corner of the room. At this moment, Captain Malik raised his head and looked at something. A soft light sprinkled on his body, but because of the screen, Mayfair could not see what Captain Malik was looking at, but she guessed that he should be looking at the windowsill. He was looking outside the window, as if he was thinking about something absent-mindedly. Even the sound of Mayfair struggling after waking up did not disturb him. Why not send me to the inner temple and hand me over to that man-eating monster? Mayfair said coldly at this time. It fell asleep. Captain Malik said indifferently, You are lucky. In fact, it is very easy to fall asleep, but after waking up, it will be hungry. When it needs to eat, it will become particularly irritable. So, I can only keep my life until it wakes up. Mayfair was silent. Don't worry, I won't send you tomorrow. Captain Malik still did not look at Mayfair. Because of the escape, the village has not been found, so the priest candidate was temporarily changed. Who is it? Mayfair was shocked. It is the little daughter of Eric's family. Captain Malik said expressionlessly. She looks very happy. Tonight, The village is preparing a celebration for her. She is not even 80 years old this year. Mayfair struggled agitatedly again, and her delicate skin was directly damaged because of this. She will be sent to the temple in the middle of the night. Captain Malik suddenly stood up. I'm going out to patrol. Don't think about leaving this room. I have released a barrier outside. With your strength, you can't open it. At this time, he looked at Mayfair and said indifferently, Of course, if you want to kill yourself, I will not stop you. It is just taking care of one more corpse. Wait, you come back. Malik, you come back, she screamed. However, Captain Malik had already left the room and locked the door. Mayfair struggled to no avail. She could only lie on the stone bed in frustration. She said to herself, You can't give up. You have to escape from this room and save Uncle Eric's daughter. You can't give up. You can't give up. She gritted her teeth and sat up again. Then, she held the shackles with force. She straightened her foot and tried to pull it out of the shackles. The metal had already worn through her skin and even her flesh. Finally, with a miserable cry, Mephistopheles successfully pulled her left leg out. The price she paid was that her left ankle was now bleeding profusely to the point where it was badly mangled. At this time, her whole body was soaked in cold sweat due to the pain. Her face was as white as paper. Even when she moved her left foot that was successfully pulled out, she felt a piercing pain. However, time did not wait for her. Mayfair looked at the shackles on her right foot again. This time, the pain almost made her faint. She failed. That kind of inhuman pain, when it happened for the second time, became a tiger that blocked the road. Mayfair couldn't help but curl up and cry secretly. She didn't cry out loud, but her tears soon mixed with sweat, dripped on the stone bed, and then melted. Suddenly, something fell out of her clothes. It was that incomparably sweet candy. Mayfair trembled at this time and held the candy up. She was distracted. After her mind wandered, Mephistopheles took a deep breath and unwrapped the candy. She broke the candy in half and put half of it in her mouth, while the other half was wrapped in the candy again and kept close to her body. Feeling the sweet taste in her mouth again, Mayfair carelessly wiped the stains on her face with her palm. Mayfair, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't taste bitter. Mayfair is sweet, she muttered to herself. Then she trembled, gritted her teeth, and began to whip her right foot again. The hard metal shackles directly began to scratch the flesh on her ankle together with the skin, little by little. Finally, she fell under the stone bed. Mayfair gasped for breath. She only felt the burning pain in her feet now. Even the air could bully her bloody feet. She rested for a moment and began to slowly crawl on the floor. It was just that her physical strength was astonishing. Now, she was so tired that she just wanted to faint directly. There was a light in front, which should be the light from outside the window. Most of the light was blocked by the screen. Captain Malik was sitting in this place just now. Mayfair crawled here, thinking that if there was a barrier on the door, she could climb out of the window. She subconsciously looked at it. What she saw was not a window at all, but a coffin placed vertically. The light was actually emitted by the coffin. Luminous stone. This coffin was inlaid with a few luminous stones. This was a relatively easy material to obtain in the roaring forest. Malik, have you been looking at it all this time? Mayfair gritted her teeth and crawled to the coffin. Then, she grabbed the coffin and climbed up with difficulty. She hesitated, but in the end, she opened the coffin and opened her eyes to look inside. Empty. Empty? There was nothing inside. Mayfair opened her mouth. In the end, she could only ignore the empty coffin and look at the door of the room. She couldn't open it. No matter what she did, she couldn't open it. She had already tried every method to dispel the curse, but the barrier released by the door completely exceeded her strength. Just as Captain Malik had said, she couldn't leave the room no matter what. Time had already quietly approached the time when a new sacrifice would be sent to the temple. Mayfair's heart was incomparably anxious, and because the injuries on her feet couldn't be treated effectively, she had lost too much blood. She could only bandage them simply, but the blood had completely seeped out. Mayfair only felt that her eyelids were getting heavier and heavier. She felt that she could fall asleep at any time. Maybe after she fell asleep, she would never wake up again. Maybe after she woke up, it would be a new today. Well, if we return to the morning, Mayfair's vision gradually became blurred. Then no one will die. As long as I can't walk out of today, no one will die. This is also good. But will I forget? She slowly took out the remaining half of the milk candy in her arms. Her fingers unwrapped the candy with difficulty, and finally, she slowly put the remaining half of the candy into her mouth. She waited for the sweet to melt. She didn't want to forget. Right at this moment, many black patterns suddenly appeared on Mayfair's body. The patterns covered her entire body in an instant. In the end, many shadow-like arms strangely extended out from the blossoming patterns. The arms directly wrapped Mayfair up like a black, giant cocoon. Finally, her body began to sink little by little. It was a darkness that spread out under her. She couldn't hear any sound. Her eyes had completely lost their luster, like an empty shell. She couldn't even taste the taste in her mouth. Crack! A soft sound at this time, but at this time it startled something. It startled everything strange here. It was as if the light from the fire had dispersed the darkness in an instant. The shadowy arms on her body began to tremble randomly, and then quickly returned to the blossoming patterns. At this time, the patterns also quickly began to shrink. Finally, all of the patterns disappeared into Mephistopheles' forehead. Her eyes regained a trace of luster again. At this time, the enchanted door had been opened, and someone appeared in front of her. I found a key outside, so I opened the door to see. "Are you okay, Miss Mayfair?" The elf lady cried out at this time. She cried and said, "I'm sorry, I ate the candy you gave me. Can you give me another one?" Hashtag, 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 PS 7184. Chapter 1798. The potions dropped by the monsters in the game chessboard had no effect on the original creatures in chessboard. However, Boss Luo found some healing potions in this room. Mayfair recognized the effects of these potions, and according to her, the potions here were relatively complete. This was not a particularly strange thing. The room belonged to Captain Malik. As the captain of the temple guards, he lived in the temple for a long time. It was inevitable that the temple guards would be injured during their daily training, so it was reasonable for the captain's room to prepare more potions. I can do it myself." Mayfair looked away. At this time, Boss Luo was using some kind of potion to clean the wound on Mayfair's foot. Miss Elf's face was very pale because of excessive blood loss. "Okay, you can do it." Boss Luo nodded. He never forced anyone to do anything. But Mayfair could not help but be startled. Was this really the case? Shouldn't he be persistent at this time? She had to treat the wound silently. In fact, the pain made it difficult for her to think about anything else, but she still remembered one thing. How did you come in? I have already... Speaking of this, Boss Luo smiled casually and said, "Miss Mayfair, it should be a dangerous thing to leave someone outside the temple." Miss Elf could not help but feel embarrassed. At that time, Captain Malik and I would be far away, so I didn't have time to move you to a farther place, and I also covered you well. I'm sorry. I was bitten by a snake, so I woke up," Boss Luo said with a serious face. "Snake?" Mayfair was shocked, and even her hands subconsciously stopped. She blamed herself and said, "Damn, why didn't I think of a snake? It was too dangerous. How are you? Are you poisoned? Look for it. There should be some herbs here that could detoxify. Why are you laughing?" She saw Boss Luo's expression was like a smile. Mayfair reacted and said angrily, "You lied to me. You are not injured at all." "Then we're even, Miss Mayfair." Luochio smiled slightly. "How could it be like this?" Mephistopheles laughed bitterly. Then he sighed and said, "But you saved me again. The person who saved you last time was Dr. Gors." Boss Luo shook his head. Mayfair said in a bad mood, "You always feel that it is difficult to accept other people's gratitude." Boss Luo didn't express his opinion. He began to look around the room that belonged to Captain Malik. Naturally, he noticed the coffin made of luminous stone placed against the wall. After Mayfair opened it, she obviously did not close it, so it was obvious that the coffin was empty. Besides that, there was nothing special about the room. Of course, The cold stone bed and the shackle mechanism on the stone bed seemed out of place. Probably, under normal circumstances, no one would like to rest on such a bed. Did you really find the key outside and open the door? At this time, Mayfair had already bandaged her wounds. The effects of the medicine she found in Captain Malik's room were unexpectedly remarkable, even better than what she knew. The pain had even been effectively alleviated. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before his legs regained some mobility, right? Yes, it's this one. Boss Luo opened his palm, and there was indeed a key in his palm. How can it be? Mayfair said in disbelief. Captain Malik imprisoned me here, and even cast a barrier on the door. How can it be opened so easily with a key? No, even if it could be opened with a key, why would he throw the key outside? Maybe we can find him and find out. Boss Luo thought for a while. You're right. All right. Mayfair quickly asked, when you came in, did you notice anything? Boss Luo said, most of the guards were gathered at the entrance of the temple, or went there. So when I came in, I did not meet any of the guards here. The entrance? Oh no, Mayfair said in shock. They must be going to welcome the team that went up the mountain. After I escaped, the village chose a new sacrifice and sent it up the mountain. No, I have to save her. That child is innocent. With that, Mayfair quickly stood up. But her injury was only effectively relieved, not healed. The moment she landed, the pain exploded again, making her want to faint again. She almost fell to the ground. Boss Luo reached out and supported her. Obviously, it's hard for you to do anything in your current state. I'm so useless. Mayfair was depressed. You're already very powerful. Luochio shook his head. Under such circumstances, you can still escape from the shackles. Leave the rest to me. But originally, the purpose of taking the trial road was to go to the temple's god spirit. Boss Luo said casually, now we're just continuing what we started before. If you don't mind, I'll carry you. If you hesitate, it might be a waste of time. I'm very light. Mayfair's voice was as soft as a mosquito's. Boss Luo smiled. He looked around the room and finally found a blanket from the closet. He put on his back first. Then he squatted down and signaled Mayfair to climb up. The elf lady climbed up stiffly on the back that was especially wide because of the blanket. She found that she couldn't feel the other person's skin because they were so close. She even had a strange feeling. Why is it so hard here? It's because I'm wearing an invisible piece of armor. Boss Luo said casually, then it's time to act. You should hurry up and recover your strength. Mayfair's hands subconsciously hugged a little tighter. Invisible armor? But she had a feeling that even if there was no invisible armor, this blanket would still be put on. He didn't want to take advantage of her at all. He seemed to be a prince. It really works. They were already at the exit of the maze. They had been following the marks left by Gerald and finally succeeded in passing the second level of the maze. At this time, the three of them walked out of the maze and once again entered the white fog. The maze disappeared directly. Mr. Sneeve seemed to have a lot on his mind at this time. Are you worried about the last level? Dr. Gores frowned at this time. According to the situation of the previous two levels, I have already believed that your servant did indeed pass this trial. So, how to pass the third level, you first tell me. The third level, you will encounter a statue. Mr. Sneeve said slowly, there is only one question. If you answer it correctly, you can pass. But if you answer it incorrectly, I don't know what will happen if you answer it incorrectly. Your servant didn't tell you? Tina couldn't help but ask curiously. Mr. Sneeve shook his head. Gerald didn't specify what the question was and what the answer was. He just said that he passed, and then he passed. At that time, I was anxious to join my companions, so I didn't care too much. Dr. Gore seemed to be talking to himself. The first level is courage, so you will encounter the powerful Minotaur guard. The second level is wisdom, so it is a complicated maze. The third level is a test of the mind. There's only one question. She knew that the correct answer would definitely be a positive one. The trial road, courage, wisdom, mind. A good mind is really old-fashioned. It seems that we don't have to worry too much. Maybe the third level will be easier to pass. Let's go. We should be able to reach the temple soon. Miss Maid suddenly said at this time. Mr. Sneeve, the statue you said, is it like this? Her voice was a little dignified. In the direction that Miss Maid pointed at, the thick fog instantly dispersed, revealing a straight passage. At the end of the passage, there was a statue of a woman. The female statue was blindfolded. Her hands were crossed on her chest, and she was kneeling. Her whole body was slightly tilted forward, but strangely, there was a stone chain around her neck. There was only one part of the chain, and it was straight up. The statue as a whole looked like a person who was pulled up from the top of the chain around her neck. I heard the question. Miss Maid screamed in a low voice at this time. I heard it too. Dr. Gores also frowned at this time. Mr. Sneeve's face changed slightly. Obviously, he also heard the question at this time. Dr. Gores suddenly said at this time, "What question did you hear?" Miss Maid opened her mouth at this time, but immediately closed her mouth tightly, as if she wanted to say something. Mr. Sneeve was even more silent. Dr. Gores had to smile bitterly. It seems that I was wrong. This level is not easy to pass. And probably each of us heard a different question. Or we're even more unwilling to mention it to others, right? Tina and Mr. Sneeve still didn't say anything. Dr. Gores suddenly said at this time, "Do you want to give up this level, Doctor?" Miss Maid looked at him in surprise. Dr. Gores said indifferently, "I intend to give up this level. I won't go on the following road. If you're interested, you can have a try. I will bless you here." "No, I must go up." Mr. Sneeve suddenly became very excited at this time. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the weird blindfolded female statue, and walked past it quickly. But soon, Mr. Sneeve saw Dr. Gores and the maid Tina in front of him, who were looking at him with a shocked expression. To be exact, Mr. Sneeve, who had just walked past the statue, was now walking from behind Dr. Gores and Tina. The space was folded. Dr. Gores opened his mouth at this time. Mr. Sneeve gritted his teeth, turned around, and rushed back quickly, but this time he came back from the front again. He didn't give up and walked around randomly. But no matter how many times he walked, he finally returned to Gores and Tina. It seems that unless we answer the question, we will be trapped here forever. Dr. Gores looked at the blindfolded female statue and muttered to himself, "Why are you blindfolded? Well, so, it seems that Captain Malik didn't really want to kill you." In the passage inside the temple, it was so quiet that only the footsteps of Boss Luo and the conversation between the two could be heard. Mephistopheles had already told her how she had been captured. She had even mentioned that Captain Malik had clearly discovered her when she was right outside the inner temple. However, he had not exposed her and had even planned to let her go in the end. "I don't understand it either," Mayfair said doubtfully. "He wanted to let me go at first, but after I said a few words to him, he changed his mind." "You told him that you saw him kill his own people with your own eyes," Boss Luo said slowly. "He changed his mind after hearing this. You're saying that when I appeared at the door of the inner palace back then, Captain Malik didn't realize that I had followed him here." Mephistopheles thought for a moment and said, "He thought that I had snuck in and just happened to appear at the door of the inner palace. He thought that I had only heard something but didn't know what had happened. That's the only explanation, isn't it?" Boss Luo nodded. Mayfair was more doubtful. "But logically speaking, he could have let me go if he didn't know. But since he knew that I found out about his crime, he should have killed me, right? But he didn't kill me. He even imprisoned me. This doesn't make sense at all. We're here. We're here. Where are we?" Mayfair raised her head subconsciously, and then her face changed in shock. "This is the inner temple. The place where the gods hibernated was the place where she met Captain Malik officially. How'd you get here so quickly? It was the same when she walked the trial road. How did she arrive at the destination directly? Although the guards went to the main entrance of the temple to welcome the team that sent the offerings up the mountain, this was too smooth, wasn't it? Hey, wait, you opened the door just like that." Just as Mayfair was shocked and panicked, Boss Luo pushed open the door of the inner temple without hesitation, which scared the elf lady so much that her heart started to beat rapidly. She even felt that she was about to suffocate, and her mind was blank. She could only stare blankly as the door opened bit by bit. Through the light of the lamps, everything in the inner temple began to come into her sight. He saw a woman in white with her eyes covered by golden cloth. She was sitting on a huge chair in a dignified manner, not moving at all. Gods! Miss Mayfair muttered at this moment.